Chapter 1379. Xiaohua saw the water-patterned butterfly flapping its wings and chasing after him. Its speed was actually comparable to a sixth-stage qi refining cultivator. The corner of his mouth unconsciously revealed a trace of a smile. He flew sideways into the sky, controlling his speed to a certain degree. He was just able to fly faster than the water-patterned butterfly, but not by much. Little by little, he lured the water-patterned butterfly into the swamp next to the huge rock. The water-patterned butterfly, seeing that it couldn't catch up, unconsciously flapped its wings repeatedly. The brilliance of the talisman scripts on its wings flapped, and one after another, spinning spirit chi rods flew out one after another. Not only did they smash into the mountain rocks, but they also stirred up the mist in the swamp. This was different from the strong winds that Xiaohua usually saw. Not only did these rod-shaped spirit chi rods not disperse the mist, but because of the mist, Xiaohua's vision became even worse. After the last spirit chi rod was released, the talisman scripts on the water-patterned butterfly's body became somewhat dim. It seemed that its vitality had been damaged, and it didn't have the strength to release any more spirit chi rods. Moreover, the water-patterned butterfly flapped its wings and actually wanted to turn around and return. Huh? Xiaohua was very surprised. Isn't this water-patterned butterfly a bit too intelligent? It wasn't easy for him to lure the water-patterned butterfly away. How could he let it turn around? Immediately, Xiaohua didn't hold back. He flipped his wrist, and several fireball talismans that he had long since stored up power shot out. They surrounded the water-patterned butterfly and began to explode with a rumbling sound. At the same time, Xiaohua didn't hesitate. He urged his magic power and flew with all his strength to the place where the rainbow cloud was. When he got close, he immediately used a spell and extracted the entire rainbow cloud from the swamp. With a wave of his hand, he sent it into the space behind his head. Soon after, Xiaohua controlled the puppet inside the space and began to slowly dig a hole in a corner of the space, preparing to plant the rainbow cloud inside. Just as Xiaohua sent the rainbow cloud into the space, the water-patterned butterfly escaped from several exploding fireballs in an extremely sorry state. Its pitch-black wings had a faint flame aura and some black smoke. There were even some cracks on its wings. However, at the same time that the rainbow cloud disappeared, the water-patterned butterfly seemed to feel something. Its originally somewhat trembling wings suddenly flapped, and the water-patterned butterfly chased after Xiaohua with extreme speed. Xiaohua naturally paid close attention to the movements of the water-patterned butterfly. When he saw the water-patterned butterfly fly out of the group of fireballs and even fly faster than before, he immediately laughed and said, "You should obediently stay in Yunxi Marsh. This young master won't play with you anymore." Then, he flew high into the sky and flew into the distance. What shocked Xiaohua was that the water-patterned butterfly was even crazier than before. It flapped its wings and did its utmost to strike out the spirit chi staff while chasing relentlessly. Fortunately, Xiaohua flew much faster than the water-patterned butterfly. After a few twists and turns, he made several detours and got rid of the water-patterned butterfly. After flying far away, Xiaohua very strangely looked at the clouds and mist behind him that were stirred up by countless spirit chi staffs of various sizes and muttered to himself, "Isn't it just picking the rainbow cloud? You didn't plant it, so why are you chasing this young master like it's something that belongs to your family?" After that, Xiaohua took some time to wait for the puppet to finish digging a big hole. He then took some water and mud from the swamp and placed the rainbow epiphyllum inside. It seemed like Xiaohua wanted to try out how to plant the rainbow epiphyllum. However, what Xiaohua didn't expect was that at the stem of the rainbow cloud, there were 2 rice grain-sized eggs stuck to it. When Xiaohua put the rainbow cloud into the space, they also came in. After planting the rainbow cloud, Xiaohua flew for a while before taking out the consecutive notes talisman. He urged it with his magic power, and the consecutive notes talisman actually whistled and flew in a direction. I don't know which fellow Taoist is still alive. It's most likely Li Xiaowen. Xiaohua thought and sped up to chase. The consecutive notes talisman flew out of Yunxi Marsh. When Xiaohua flew to a slightly deviated cliff, Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian hurriedly greeted him. Sun Fian smiled and said, I already said that fellow Daoist Xiao's magic power is profound and his flying speed is fast. How could he be captured by the disciples of the Fire Flame sect? If fellow Daoist Li made a bet with I, wouldn't the result immediately be clear? Xiaohua originally wanted to face Sun Fian's condemnation, but when he saw Sun Fian's attitude, he was stunned at first. Then, he cupped his hands and said, fellow Daoist Sun is too kind. How can I's cultivation be compared to the two seniors? The difference is too great. Li Xiaowen also had a harmonious expression, as if the scene in Yunxi Marsh had never happened. He smiled and said, fellow Daoist Xiao is too modest. When we were in the second layer of the Qi refining realm, how could we have fellow Daoist Xiao's magical power? I'm afraid that when fellow Daoist Xiao cultivates to the fourth layer of the Qi refining realm, we won't be fellow Daoist Xiao's opponent. Hearing this, Sun Fian's expression changed slightly, but it was immediately covered by a smile. Xiaohua saw that the two people didn't mention a word about what happened before, and he understood in his heart. His eyes turned, and he said with a smile, I just practiced a rare kind of cultivation method, which is why I can fly slightly faster. But if this is known by others, I won't have any advantage to speak of. It's not as good as the two fellow Taoists who have profound magic power, so I'm not afraid of being known by others. When Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian heard this, they both had a look of understanding and nodded. This is fellow Daoist Xiao's unique magical power. The two of us can guarantee that if fellow Daoist Xiao doesn't reveal it, others definitely won't know. Xiaohua cupped his hands. Many thanks for the two fellow Daoists' magnanimity. Li Xiaowen glanced at Sun Fian, then turned to Xiaohua and said, fellow Daoist Xiao, our silk bags haven't changed, I wonder if fellow Daoist Xiao, the silk bag I obtained from Yongshang has changed. Xiaohua said as he took out the silk bag that had already turned into an ordinary one. Haha, that's great. Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian both clapped and laughed, asking, where is the next place? Fire Thaw Valley. Xiaohua said without hesitation. Fire Thaw Valley. When Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian heard this, they didn't frown or be shocked like Xiaohua thought. They just understood like before. Could it be, the two fellow Taoists already know? Xiaohua asked curiously. To be honest with fellow Daoist Xiao, just now when we fled here first, we already discussed it. Li Xiaowen said with a smile, I and Sun Fian received fellow Daoist Xiao's reminder. Thinking about Nan Kaiping, Yu Lianshan, and Yunxi Lake, according to their characteristics, we felt that this Fire Thaw Valley was also within fellow Daoist Xiao's arrangements. Oh. Xiaohua understood. So, if fellow Daoist Xiao can't come out in time, the two of us might have to go to Fire Thaw Valley to try our luck after waiting for a day. Sun Fian said, of course, this is only a backup plan. Since fellow Daoist Xiao has come out, the three of us have already gathered, and the remaining 3 silk bags are all intact. Naturally, this is the best. Are we going to Fire Thaw Valley now? Xiaohua nodded and asked. Li Xiaowen shook his head, we can't go today. We offended the Fire Flame sect, and we don't know if they have an ambush outside. Yunxi Lake is admittedly big, but if they want to, I'm afraid they'll look for us outside. Why don't we create a diversion and rest here for a day? It won't be too late to go out after they've chased us far away. Hearing this, Xiaohua nodded repeatedly. This was the trick he used to trick the 100 Herbs sect when he came out of Yellow Flower Ridge. There are hidden caves in this mountain. Let's go in first. We'll leave tomorrow morning. Sun Fian flew first, and each of them found a cave at the foot of the mountain to adjust their breathing and rest. Xiaohua sat alone in the cave, thinking about Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian's attitude just now. He couldn't help but sneer. He was very clear that it was because he revealed some divine abilities that surpassed ordinary cultivators that made the two of them treat him as an equal. Moreover, because of the common goal of treasure hunting, the three of them were temporarily in a kind of balance. No one could say for sure what would happen after the treasure hunt. As for whether Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian would suddenly attack him and take away the silk bags, Xiao Hua wasn't too worried. After all, he was good at flying. If the two of them didn't have full confidence, they definitely wouldn't attack him. Besides, the two of them were still suspicious of each other. Who would take the risk to offend a cultivator who could fly faster than them? As for whether or not the two of them would leak out the fact that he could fly faster, Xiao Hua was even less afraid. Wait until this young master's cultivation catches up to yours. Would I still be afraid of you talking nonsense? As Xiao Hua thought, he took another marrow-cleansing pill and calmly refined the medicinal efficacy. Moreover, he immersed his mind into the space, comprehending the Tao of heaven and delving into the towering realm. In the next few days, the three of them seemed to have the help of God, and their progress was very smooth. In the Fire Melt Valley, beside a large expanse of boiling magma, Sun Fian's silk bag was opened by the rich and hot fire's spiritual energy, and they found the next location, Hurricane Canyon. The three of them hurriedly rushed to Hurricane Canyon, braving the hurricane that could easily blow away the protective yellow talismans. Under the circumstances of the three people's confinement talismans, Vajra talismans, and other protective yellow talismans, they finally opened Li Xiaowen's silk bag inside the hurricane. The hurricane that could disperse the yellow talismans actually couldn't take away the weightless silk bag, and Qing Fengmin's voice also didn't disperse inside the hurricane. Fellow Taoists, congratulations, congratulations. The next test is the last one. I'm sure that fellow Taoists already have some complaints in their hearts. However, I still have to tell fellow Taoists that this time there is indeed a complete set of cultivation methods, and there are also magic tools, medicinal pills, and so on. However, I, Tian Qi, have a lot of fellow Taoists, and I also want to give this opportunity to everyone fairly, so I have no choice but to set this test. I hope that fellow Taoists who can reach the end can understand my painstaking efforts. This Qing Fengmin's words were long-winded, causing the three of them to only curse in their hearts. While bitterly holding on to the yellow talismans that were about to be blown away by the hurricane, they pricked up their ears to listen. When Qing Fengmin said the three words, Thunderclap Cave, the three of them no longer paid any attention to the silk bag, and all of them hurriedly flew out of Hurricane Canyon. However, after leaving Hurricane Canyon and arriving at a safe place, Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian's complexions didn't look good. Chapter 1380. When Xiao Hua saw their unsightly expressions, he immediately knew that the Thunder Accumulation Cave was definitely not a good place to live. While the three of them were discussing under a tree in the dense forest, Xiao Hua asked, "Fellow Taoists, the Thunder Accumulation Cave, I'm afraid, is extremely difficult, right?" "Alas, it's more than difficult." Sun Fian glanced at Xiao Hua. If it was before, he would have mocked Xiao Hua's ignorance. But now, his face was full of worry. He looked at Li Xiaowen and said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao must know. I previously discussed with fellow Taoist Li and investigated many dangerous places in our country of Xi. This Thunder Accumulation Cave was also mentioned, but we rejected it at that time." "Why?" Xiao Hua asked curiously. "Is it more dangerous than Yulian Mountain and southern Kaiping?" "What should I say?" Li Xiaowen only wanted to roll his eyes at Xiao Hua, but he still explained patiently, "Southern Kaiping and Thunder Accumulation Cave can't be compared at all." "Well, fellow Taoist Xiao, the southern Rainbow Plains, the Yulian Mountains, the Fire Fusion Valley, and other places. Including the Hurricane Valley, are all places that loose cultivators like us or Qi condensation cultivators can go to. Even low-level Qi condensation cultivators can survive if they are lucky. But in the Thunder Accumulation Cave, heavenly thunder rolls with incomparable power. It's simply a place for foundation establishment and gold core cultivators. If we aura refining cultivators go in, we'll be struck by a thunderbolt and our souls will scatter. How can we look for treasures? I wonder what fellow Taoist Xiao thinks. Xiao Hua suddenly understood and nodded slightly. But then he asked curiously, as the name suggests, this thunder accumulation cave should be a place where lightning accumulates. Then, are there any spiritual objects or spiritual herbs inside? Otherwise, why would foundation establishment and gold core cultivators go there? Hearing Xiao Hua's question, Sun Fian said with a smile, fellow Taoist Xiao, has a water attribute physique. Fellow Taoist Li has a fire attribute physique. And I, like fellow Taoist Xiao, also has a water attribute physique. However, there are many other fellow Taoists who have a variation physique of the 5 elements, such as a thunder attribute physique. When these fellow Taoists cultivate, although they won't be directly struck by lightning, if they can cultivate in a place like Thunder Accumulation Cave, they'll get twice the result with half the effort. Therefore, although this place is considered difficult by us, it is a rare place for them. In addition, there are also some thunder magic arts, such as the Thunder Palm and the Thunder Attraction skill, which can only be easily learned in the Thunder Accumulation Cave. Therefore, many people with profound cultivation come here to practice these magic arts. Li Xiaowen added. Thunder Palm. Xiao Hua's heart stirred. It seemed that the Feng clan's foundational spells had something like this, but he was baffled by it and threw it to the side. What's more, because the Thunder Accumulation Cave is quite dangerous and the lightning strikes are quite powerful, many seniors in the foundation establishment stage and the gold core stage come here when they encounter bottlenecks in their cultivation. Sun Fian echoed, in short, that place is not a place for us ordinary rogue cultivators. If that's the case, why does fellow Taoist Qing still want us to go there? Xiao Hua smiled and said, why would we go there when we know we will die? Ha ha ha, Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian heard this and their faces suddenly brightened. They both held their foreheads and laughed heartily. Fellow Taoist Xiao's words hit the nail on the head. In our hearts, we are only afraid of the Thunder Accumulation Cave, but we forgot that from the south-colored plain to the Yulian Mountain, and finally to the Fire Fusion Valley and the Hurricane Valley, the difficulty is getting smaller and smaller. This is already the last place. How could fellow Taoist Qing let us give up halfway? Exactly. Let's go quickly. Li Xiaowen urged, the 30 days are approaching, we can't let this silk pouch become useless. After the three finished their discussion, they were full of confidence again. Li Xiaowen knew that Xiao Hua didn't know where the Thunder Accumulation Cave was, so he took the lead. Sun Fian accompanied Xiao Hua and followed behind. Several days later, just as the three of them were flying, Xiao Hua suddenly heard the faint sound of beating drums. Every time the drum sounded, it hit his heart, making it somewhat difficult for him to breathe. But what surprised him was that along with the drum sound, his meridians also faintly trembled. This was something that hadn't happened since he left Yellow Flower Ridge. The drum sound didn't continue, and it only lasted for a moment before it stopped. Xiao Hua looked at Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian from the side. The two of them didn't seem to be aware of it. He wanted to open his mouth and ask, but after thinking for a moment, he didn't speak. After flying for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, Xiao Hua had already heard several drum sounds. Only then did he hear Sun Fian say with a smile, fellow Taoist Xiao, did you hear the sound of thunder in the distance? Sound of thunder? Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. It seems to be the sound of drums. Ha, fellow Taoist Xiao really knows how to joke. This place isn't far from the Thunder Accumulation Cave, so naturally it's the sound of thunder. Sun Fian said with a smile. It's not fellow Taoist Xiao's fault. We didn't explain it clearly, so how would fellow Taoist Xiao know the reason? Li Xiaowen said, this Thunder Accumulation Cave is a flash of Jilei Peak. This Jilei Peak is very strange. It's incomparably tall, and there's a huge platform on top of the peak. For some reason, heavenly lightning often strikes this platform. As for the sound, it's really like what fellow Taoist Xiao said, it's similar to the sound of drums. This isn't the strangest thing. The most inconceivable thing is that after the heavenly lightning strikes the platform on top of the mountain, it doesn't disappear. Instead, it's transmitted from Jile Peak to this thunder accumulation cave in the middle of the mountain. Because it's transmitted indirectly by the mountain, its power is much weaker, so it can be used by cultivators like us. Xiaohua secretly curled his lips. When they left Hurricane Valley, they didn't say anything. After flying for several days, they still didn't say anything. Instead, they only said it after he made a fool of himself and asked, "I really don't know what they're thinking." However, Xiaohua also deeply understood that his experience was too shallow. If he didn't increase his knowledge, he was afraid that he would suffer in the future. Therefore, he thought of some travel notes in his space and the book he got from the Zhu family. "I'll just read it when I'm not cultivating. I don't want to be deceived in the future without knowing it," Xiaohua said in his heart. Seeing that Xiaohua was silent, Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian looked at each other and didn't say anything. The two of them were just surprised in their hearts. Not to mention that Xiaohua's flying speed was extremely fast, far from what they could compare with. This might be the reason why Xiaohua said that he learned a special spell. Xiaohua's cultivation base was just at the early stage of the second layer of the qi refining realm when Li Xiaowen saw Xiaohua. Moreover, it looked like he had just set foot in the second layer of the qi refining realm. That was in Li Xiaowen's eyes. Xiaohua, an 18-year-old loose cultivator, would never make any significant progress. At best, he would only be at the third layer of the qi refining realm in this lifetime. However, since the southern Kaiping, in these short few days, Xiaohua's cultivation base had rapidly increased. It was almost faster than his flying speed. He actually went from the early stage of the second layer of the qi refining realm directly to the peak of the second layer of the qi refining realm. This kind of cultivation speed was extremely rare even in famous large sects. Of course, the peak of the second layer of the qi refining realm wasn't a taboo for Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian. What they were worried about was that with Xiaohua's cultivation speed, as long as he had a suitable cultivation method, in less than a year, no, perhaps as long as half a year, Xiaohua would be able to cultivate to the fourth layer of the qi refining realm. Even if he cultivated to the fifth layer of the qi refining realm, the two of them would absolutely not be surprised. Was there a suitable cultivation method in Heaven Forsaken? Others might not know, but Li Xiaowen knew that talisman masters had special privileges in Heaven Forsaken. As long as Xiaohua could refine yellow talismans, Xiaohua could choose any cultivation method below the fifth layer of the qi refining realm. After all, Heaven Forsaken didn't have high-level cultivation methods, but there were many low-level ones. However, Li Xiaowen still had a question. If Xiaohua had this kind of aptitude, then why? He was already 18 years old now, but why was his cultivation only at the second layer of the qi refining realm? With this kind of cultivation aptitude, not to mention Blazing Flame School, even Xuanyan School and Splendid School would fight to the death for him. How could he possibly be reduced to becoming a loose cultivator and joining Heaven Forsaken? Of course, these doubts and astonishment were all a kind of appearance, but from the depths of their hearts, there was a kind of faint fear. Xiaohua's words, "I don't want others to know about some of I's matters, so please be careful with what you say, fellow Taoists," had been echoing in their ears, as if a large stone was pressing down on their hearts. They were very doubtful. If Xiaohua's cultivation was raised by another layer and he could kill the two of them, would Xiaohua still leave them a way out? This was indeed gauging the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. At this time, why would Xiaohua need to use too much strength to kill them? The two people's silk bags had already been opened long ago, and Xiaohua was already very proficient in using force to break through. Dealing with them would be as easy as lifting a finger. Xiaohua didn't know what the two people were thinking. He looked at the Jile Peak that was getting closer and closer with interest. The Jile Peak was very high, and the platform on it was also very large, like a flat-top mountain. As several heavenly thunders fell on the flat top of the mountain, some ear-splitting drum sounds had already entered their ears. In addition, as they approached the Jile peak, the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth also began to become irritable. A kind of restless and unstable aura rippled in the surroundings. Xiaohua tried to use Splendid Flame's mental cultivation method to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth from the outside, but found that only a very small amount of spiritual energy could be absorbed into the meridians. Moreover, the spiritual energy was also abnormally active, almost uncontrolled by the mental cultivation method, and chaotically collided within the meridians. However, as the spiritual energy was refined, Xiaohua's flesh and blood also had a slight reaction this time, but it was much weaker than the previous time in the Inferno Valley. Thinking of the matter in the Inferno Valley, Xiaohua himself felt that it was inexplicable. Xiaohua and the other two people were almost smooth sailing in the Inferno Valley, and they didn't encounter any danger. However, when Sun Fian's silk bag opened next to the magma, the hot and lively fire spiritual energy was absorbed by Xiaohua's meridians. Xiaohua's flesh and blood all over his body began to violently heat up, and he felt that countless small spots in his body were trembling, as if they were all absorbing the fire energy. Of course, this kind of abnormality was fleeting. Today, it was just a slight heat, and then it immediately disappeared without a trace, leaving Xiaohua at a loss. That's the Jile cave. Li Xiaowen pointed at a vague black spot in the middle of the Jile peak. Chapter 1381. As usual, Li Xiaowen flew in the front, followed by Xiaohua and Sun Fian. However, when they flew to a place not too far away from Jile Peak, the sound of thunder became louder and louder. Not only could they hear it, but what surprised Xiaohua was that the sound seemed to hit his heart. Xiaohua was still okay. When the thunder sounded, he only felt a wave of discomfort. Then the thunder stopped and he returned to normal. Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian couldn't do it. Their hands and feet trembled slightly, and their bones and tendons went soft. But after the thunder stopped, they still trembled and couldn't control themselves. This was still considered light. Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian persisted for the time it took to smoke a cigarette. Seeing that they were close to Jile Peak, a wave of thunder shook. The two suddenly panicked and stopped. Moreover, a wave of redness appeared on their foreheads and disappeared immediately. It was the sign that the true qi in their meridians was somewhat chaotic, and their magical power was out of control. Xiao. Fellow Taoist, are you okay? Seeing Xiaohua's face as if nothing happened and his eyes looking at Jile Cave, Sun Fian asked in astonishment. I. Xiaohua saw the two's embarrassed state and frowned slightly. He smiled bitterly and said, "Who said it wasn't uncomfortable?" The sound of thunder was different from the usual heavenly thunder. It directly hit Ai's heart. It was very uncomfortable. So it's like this. Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian heard and were surprised. What? Fellow Taoists, why didn't you fly forward? Xiaohua saw the two talking and didn't move forward. Alas, we guessed wrong. Sun Fian smiled bitterly. Our cultivation is really low. This Jile Cave is really not a place we can come to. If I and fellow Taoist Li go any closer, I'm afraid there will be a risk of magical power backlash. Sun Fian used really twice in a row, reflecting the extreme helplessness in his heart. Rumble, rumble, rumble. This wave of thunder just increased in intensity, like a war drum urging people to go on stage. Xiaohua felt an indescribable feeling in his heart. Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian felt a burst of qi and blood in their chest, and their magical power was suddenly somewhat out of control. The two didn't dare to neglect and hurriedly flew back several hundred feet. Only then did they feel their magical power slowly calming down. Xiaohua followed the two of them and unconsciously turned his head to look at the distant thunder accumulation cave. If it's like this from afar, then what about inside the cave? What does it look like? Fellow Taoist Xiao. Li Xiaowen cupped his hands and said, I will speak frankly. It was hard to tell what expression Li Xiaowen had on his face. Was it embarrassment, shame, or relief? He and Sun Fian, two peak 4th layer qi refining cultivators, actually had to rely on a 2nd layer qi refining cultivator. I understand. Xiaohua waved his hand, took a deep breath, and said, since we've come to this final place through life and death, how can we not take the risk? Since you two fellow Taoists can't go, then I will go and give it a try. AI, thank you so much, fellow Taoist Xiao. I just did some calculations. Today is the deadline. If we don't open it, then fellow Taoist Fu and the others will have died in vain. Sun Fian also sighed and said, however, fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't have to enter the Thunder Accumulation Cave. If nothing unexpected happens, he can open the silk bag near the Thunder Accumulation Cave. After all, fellow Taoist Qing is only a 5th layer qi refining cultivator. He can't enter the Thunder Accumulation Cave. I know. Also, I'll rest here for a bit. I'll be right back. Xiaohua cupped his hands and turned around to fly towards the Thunder Accumulation Cave. Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian didn't dare to rest here. They could only stand there with folded arms and watch Xiaohua quickly fly towards the Thunder Accumulation Cave. The rolling thunder didn't seem to have much effect on him. Fellow Taoist Sun. Li Xiaowen saw Xiaohua approaching the Thunder Accumulation Cave and said unconsciously, fellow Taoist Li, what's the matter? Sun Fian replied casually. Oh, no, nothing. Li Xiaowen wanted to say something but stopped. He didn't say anything and just watched quietly. Sun Fian also had mixed feelings. Seeing that Li Xiaowen didn't say anything, he didn't ask and just watched with his eyes like Li Xiaowen. Xiaohua flew towards the Thunder Accumulation Cave alone. He saw that the cave was getting bigger and bigger. The deafening sound of the drum beat his heart from time to time, but it only made him feel slightly uncomfortable. Moreover, after hearing it a lot, he actually got used to it and didn't feel uncomfortable at the beginning. If this is the case, maybe I can break into the Thunder Accumulation Cave. Xiaohua gradually gained courage. The Thunder Accumulation Peak was very dry. Moreover, the mountain rocks were maroon. There weren't many trees on the mountain and it looked like a pure mountain. The spiritual qi of heaven and earth on the mountain was very abundant, far more than what Xiaohua had seen in his life. However, Xiaohua's perception was the same as before. The closer he got to the Thunder Accumulation Cave, the more active the spiritual qi of heaven and earth became. Xiaohua's death art couldn't draw spiritual qi into his body at all. It seems that only cultivators with special constitutions can cultivate here. Xiaohua tried a few times but gave up and focused on flying towards the Thunder Accumulation Cave. The Thunder Accumulation Cave in front of him wasn't big. The cave entrance was only about 10 feet wide. Waves of heat and spiritual qi of heaven and earth rushed out from the cave entrance. Moreover, it seemed that there were flashes of light in the pitch-black cave. In the flashes of light, he saw that the stone walls were red. Along with the flashes of light, there were also bursts of muffled sounds echoing in the cave. Xiaohua's qi and blood surged and he quickly flew to the side of the cave. This thunder is really strange. Xiaohua thought of the thunder tribulation he experienced in the death art. That was a real heavenly thunder. Why did it feel different from the thunder here? With this in mind, Xiaohua stretched out his hand and grabbed the last silk bag. The silk bag was exposed in the air, and strands of lively spiritual energy were sucked into the silk bag. Xiaohua smiled and lowered his head to look at it, but a moment later, that smile froze at the corners of his mouth. The silk bag only had some brilliance, but it didn't make any sound. Needless to say, this wasn't the place to open the silk bag. Do I really have to enter the Thunder Accumulation Cave? Xiaohua bit his lips and looked at the Thunder Accumulation Cave that was emitting light from time to time with some hesitation. But if he didn't enter, after today, he wouldn't be able to open the silk bag again. His cultivation method. Right at this moment, a rumbling sound came from his side. When Xiaohua turned his head to look, he saw a flash of light rapidly flying over from the distant horizon. In the blink of an eye, it entered Xiaohua's field of vision. What? What is this? Xiaohua looked at the sword light flashing in the air. Every flash was extremely far away and thought very puzzledly. Rumble, rumble, rumble. A sound similar to thunder came from the sword light. Then, it stopped in front of the thunder accumulation cave. Xiaohua rubbed his eyes. On a long, thin flying sword with countless electric lights lingering around it, stood a very ordinary-looking young cultivator. That cultivator's face was red, his eyebrows were sparse, and his eyes were looking at Xiaohua in astonishment. Before Xiaohua could withdraw his gaze from that strange flying sword, an unparalleled divine sense drowned Xiaohua like a huge wave. At the same time, the majesty coming from the young cultivator's body directly covered Xiaohua's body. Xiaohua's head was dizzy. His heart seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. His body staggered and his limbs went soft as if he was going to collapse on the ground. Huh! At the moment when Xiaohua couldn't hold on anymore, that divine sense swept over Xiaohua's body and the pressure also quickly withdrew. Xiaohua felt a burst of relaxation and immediately bowed in salute. Itinerant cultivator Xiaohua greets senior. Loose cultivator. That cultivator was slightly surprised. His figure descended from the flying sword. He pointed his finger and that flying sword immediately shrunk to the size of a pellet. That cultivator grabbed it and then sucked it into his mouth. Ah! Xiaohua was slightly stunned. Where do you cultivate? The young cultivator asked. This. Junior. Junior still doesn't have a fixed place to cultivate. Xiaohua said honestly. I just joined Heaven Forsaken and am preparing to cultivate in Heaven Forsaken. Heaven Forsaken? What kind of sect is that? The young cultivator was slightly surprised. This. Senior, this is a spontaneous organization of loose cultivators. They are all loose cultivators below the 5th level of qi refining. Xiaohua said respectfully. Oh, so it's like that. The young cultivator suddenly understood. Then, he asked with interest, I see that your cultivation is at the 2nd or 3rd level of qi refining, but your magic power is much deeper than others of the same level. This really makes I surprised. Then, he added, moreover, you're a loose cultivator. This really makes I, scratching my head. Hearing that young cultivator talking to him amiably, Xiaohua's heart warmed for no reason. He quickly bowed and said, Senior, this junior, also doesn't know. He, Xiaohua, actually, this poor Taoist also cultivated from the 1st level of qi condensation. Although this poor Taoist can't see through you, this poor Taoist can be sure that your cultivation absolutely isn't limited to qi condensation and foundation establishment. Even core formation or nascent soul can be expected. You also shouldn't undervalue yourself. Xiaohua's heart was moved. Just as he was about to speak, that young cultivator said again, this thunder accumulation cave isn't a place that ordinary cultivators can come to. Generally, people at the peak of qi refining would be nervous if they come here. You can actually come to the entrance of the thunder accumulation cave. From this, it can be seen that your future cultivation. Oh, right, why did you take the risk to come here? Xiaohua sighed and threw away the other thought. He respectfully handed over the silk bag and said, you need to take this silk bag into the thunder accumulation cave. This silk bag can be opened and you can say a place name. This junior needs to go to that place. Enter the thunder accumulation cave. What a joke. The young cultivator looked at Xiaohua and then looked at the thunder accumulation cave not far away. A trace of a bitter smile appeared on his face. He pointed his finger and said, with your cultivation. Forget it, I won't say anything about you. It's not easy for a loose cultivator to cultivate. I also know that. Give me the silk bag. Xiao Hua was delighted and hurriedly handed it over. That cultivator didn't take it. With a wave of his hand, the silk bag flew into the air and followed him into the thunder accumulation cave. As the young cultivator's figure disappeared into the cave entrance, a burst of brilliance flashed. Moreover, a burst of crackling sound was heard. It seemed to come from lightning strikes on the cave walls. In just a moment, that young cultivator walked out with a very relaxed expression. He threw the silk bag to Xiao Hua and said a place name. When Xiao Hua heard this place name, he couldn't help but be dumbstruck. Chapter 1382. That young cultivator walked out of the thunder accumulation cave. His whole body was surrounded by electric light, but his expression was the same as usual. There was nothing wrong with him. The cultivator tossed the silk bag in front of Xiao Hua and said, "The silk bag says you need to go to the Thousand Zhang Peak." Thousand Zhang Peak. Hearing this name, Xiao Hua had an indescribable feeling in his heart. Didn't Kai Zhuxia just ask me to go to Thousand Zhang Peak? But she's already gone with Li Zongbao from the Utmost Happiness faction. She definitely forgot about me. Thank you, senior. Xiao Hua took the silk bag and bowed very respectfully. And, the Thousand Zhang Peak's loose cultivator is also famous. But, you're on your own. That young cultivator wanted to say something but hesitated. He nodded at Xiao Hua, turned around and walked into the thunder accumulation cave again. Xiao Hua couldn't help but feel envious as he watched that young cultivator calmly enter and exit the thunder accumulation cave. It wasn't until the lightning flickered and the young cultivator's back disappeared that Xiao Hua withdrew his gaze. He secretly pondered, this senior, who is he? His cultivation level is far from what I can see. Moreover, it's rare for him to be so kind and amiable. It's really rare. Afterwards, Xiao Hua didn't hesitate and quickly flew back to Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian's side. Although Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian were far away, they saw Xiao Hua's situation in front of the thunder accumulation cave. Seeing Xiao Hua fly back, they came up together and cupped their hands, saying, "Congratulations, fellow Taoist Xiao. You can actually ask a senior to help." Where? Xiao Hua looked at the two and didn't answer their question. Instead, he asked, "Fellow Taoists, who is that senior? I presume you already know." This. Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian's expressions changed slightly. They looked at each other and said with a smile on their faces, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, we don't know this senior's appearance and magical power. It's not good to make wild guesses." "I see." Xiao Hua sighed and said casually, "Fellow Taoists, the place we're going to is Thousand Zhang Peak." Thousand Zhang Peak. The two of them were stunned at first. Then, they were wild with joy. They slapped their own foreheads and cried out, "Oh, I forgot about the Thousand Zhang Peak. That 1,000-feet-old man is a famous rogue cultivator in the country of Xi. Isn't his orthodoxy what we rogue cultivators yearn for even in our dreams? Fellow Taoist Qing, you've actually found Old Man 1,000 Feet's legacy. You've actually shared such a rare opportunity with us rogue cultivators. Your noble character and unquestionable integrity are truly admirable. Actually, fellow Taoist Qing is still the most meticulous. Even if there are cultivators who covet my actions, they probably don't know that my true objective is 1,000 Feet Peak." Sun Fian's face was filled with longing as he smiled and said, "Regardless of whether it's the southern Kaiping, Yulian Mountain, Yinshi Marsh, Fire Melting Valley, Hurricane Canyon, or Thunder Accumulation Cave, none of them have anything to do with the Thousand Zhang Peak. Moreover, there's still more than 10 days of travel from here to the Thousand Zhang Peak. If it weren't for fellow Xiao telling us, we wouldn't have thought of the Thousand Zhang Peak no matter what. Then, what are we waiting for?" Xiao Hua smiled. "That's right. What are we waiting for?" Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian said in unison. Then, the three of them rose up and flew in the direction of the Thousand Zhang Peak. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. Under Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian's guidance, Xiaohua smoothly arrived near the 1000 peak. Although 10 days were short, Xiaohua benefited a lot. His cultivation had already reached the peak of the second layer of the qi refining realm when he was in Yulian Mountain. Then, after a period of cultivation, he easily broke through to the third layer of the qi refining realm. However, Xiaohua didn't have a cultivation method for the third layer of the qi refining realm. The true qi in his entire meridians still flowed according to the mental cultivation method for the second layer of the qi refining realm. Although his magic power increased when he broke through, it stagnated afterward. Only after Xiaohua obtained a cultivation method for the third layer of the qi refining realm could his magic power increase again. Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian had witnessed Xiaohua's breakthrough from the second layer of the qi refining realm to the third layer of the qi refining realm. They were extremely shocked. When they broke through that year, they had spent a lot of effort. How could it be accomplished so easily by Xiaohua in just one night? However, they could only forcefully suppress this shock in their hearts. Their faces were filled with smiles as they cupped their hands and congratulated Xiaohua. Xiaohua only responded indifferently. It was as if this kind of rapid advancement in cultivation was a matter of course. It made him appear even more unfathomable. Actually, at the same time that Xiaohua consumed the marrow cleansing pill to increase his magic power, he was also carefully comprehending the Heavenly Way's ascension realm. This comprehension should be countless times more difficult than cultivating a mental cultivation method. However, in this cryptic Heavenly Way, every trace of comprehension made Xiaohua feel incomparably comfortable and made his mind incomparably joyful. Compared to this, the breakthrough of cultivation didn't excite too much of his emotions. He had already faintly felt that this comprehension was far from as simple as shortening the time of cultivation. Perhaps this comprehension was the real way of cultivation. In addition, in these 10 days, Xiaohua had already figured out some things. For example, when he went to the 100 Herbs sect, he encountered a light green brilliance in the Mount Amang, and the Wei Li Zongbao hurriedly chased after that brilliance, and the information Kai Zhuxia got from being interrogated by the blue bears. Could all these be related to the 1000 feet peak? Of course, what puzzled Xiaohua was that when Xiaohua met Qing Fengmin seemed to have given a light green object as compensation to Jiang Huanqi, a disciple of the Shanghua sect. If he wanted to keep the matter of the 1000 feet peak a secret, he wouldn't have easily divulged it. Unless that object was different from the one Kai Zhuxia obtained in the Mount Amang, or the light green brilliance that Xiaohua saw himself wasn't obtained by Kai Zhuxia. Moreover, it was different from the object given by Qing Fengmin. Also, Li Zongbao, as a genius disciple of the Utopia faction, he didn't seem to have any interest in the 1000 feet peak. Could it be that he and Kai Zhuxia really, oh, by the way, when I arrive at the 1000 feet peak, should I send Kai Zhuxia that messaging charm? Or, how should I reply to Kai Zhuxia when I see her? Xiaohua flew in the air and suddenly thought of this. Fellow cultivator Xiao. The 1000 feet peak is not far ahead, right? What are you thinking about? Sun Fian, who was beside him, said with a smile. Although Sun Fian's face was full of smiles, his heart had never calmed down. Not long after leaving the Thunder Accumulation Cave, Xiaohua broke through to level 3 of the Qi refining stage. Because he didn't have the corresponding cultivation arts, Xiaohua's magic power didn't increase, and his cultivation also stagnated. However, in these 10 days, Sun Fian could feel Xiaohua's progress every day. It was a kind of progress that he couldn't explain. He couldn't help but be vigilant. He couldn't help but treat Xiaohua as a fellow cultivator of the same level as himself. It's nothing. Fellow cultivator Sun, I was just thinking that when we left Jingbei City, there were 6 of us. Now, only 3 of us have reached the 1000 feet peak. Then, what about the other fellow cultivators? Is it that half of them are also exhausted? Xiaohua said with a smile, in this way, won't my strength be greatly damaged? Alas, fellow cultivator is thinking too much. Cultivators are the most heaven-defying. All of them are fighting for that trace of opportunity to cultivate. Especially us individual cultivators, we are at a disadvantage in all aspects. If we weren't vicious and merciless, we would have been exterminated many times by the disciples of sects. The matter of Yunshi Lake, I'm afraid that fellow cultivator Xiao didn't know the function of the rainbow epiphyllum, that's why. Fellow cultivator Sun. Li Xiaowen scolded, didn't I tell fellow cultivator before? Don't mention this matter again in the future. Why did you mention it again today? I was unwilling in my heart. Sun Fian smiled bitterly, if we could obtain the rainbow epiphyllum and refine the revolving illumination pill, we might be able to cultivate divine sense before we reach the peak of the qi refining stage. Or perhaps we could take it when we reach the peak of the qi refining stage and strengthen our divine sense. The revolving illumination pill can strengthen divine sense? Xiao Hua suddenly realized. Of course, Fan Daomao only said half of it. He didn't want to mention it later, so he didn't ask about the revolving illumination pill again. At this time, he understood why everyone was so blatantly fighting. It was all because of divine sense. Thinking of this, Xiaohua used his mind to sweep the space. The rainbow epiphyllum had already been in the space for dozens of days, which was equivalent to dozens of years outside. At this time, whether it was the rainbow epiphyllum's body or the seven-colored halo floating above it, they were all much stronger than before. Moreover, the rainbow epiphyllum's body was gradually turning from a pitch-black color to a crimson red. Cough cough. The matter is already in the past. It's useless to say more. Everyone has their own ideas, others can't force them. Li Xiaowen coughed and secretly winked at Sun Fian. Ha, we've already safely arrived at the 1,000-foot peak. Once we meet up with the other fellow Taoists of the Heaven Forsaken, we'll go look for the 1,000-foot old man's orthodoxy together. Perhaps the next 1,000-foot old man will be born from the Heaven Forsaken. Sun Fian understood tacitly. Xiao Hua withdrew his mind from the space, as if he hadn't heard Sun Fian's question. He looked at the gloomy sky in front of him and was about to speak when he suddenly frowned. He slightly tilted his head and looked behind him. What's wrong? Fellow Taoist Xiao. Li Xiaowen noticed Xiao Hua's abnormality and asked. Xiao Hua withdrew his gaze and shook his head as if nothing had happened. He said, It's nothing. I was just casually looking around. I'm afraid that someone is following behind us. Hee, how could there be? We've been flying for dozens of days and haven't found anything strange. Sun Fian also said with a smile. The three people had just flown for half a cup of tea's time when Li Xiaowen suddenly stopped. He looked back and shouted, I keep feeling that something's wrong. I don't know. Is there someone behind us? Where? Xiao Hua and Sun Fian both turned their heads. Xiao Hua asked even more exaggeratedly. There was nothing behind them. There wasn't a single person, but Li Xiaowen still didn't feel at ease. He said, I's heart is on guard. How about, we hide for a moment first and see if there's any situation. What does fellow Taoist Xiao think? Xiao Hua nodded. Fellow Taoist Li is right. There's no harm in waiting. The three people all landed and found a place to hide. Just as they hid, they saw a figure behind them. Sure enough, while flying and stopping, it chased after them. Chapter 1383. That cultivator had white teeth and red lips. His face was arrogant, and he wore a brand new Taoist robe. He was about 20 years old, and his cultivation level was around the 5th level of the Qi refinement realm. Looking at that cultivator's arrogant appearance, rather than saying that he was following Xiao Hua and the others, it was better to say that he flew over himself. Huh? Xiao Hua was surprised to see this cultivator's appearance. This cultivator was Jiang Huanqi of the Magnificent Flower sect. This guy, actually came. Xiaohua's thoughts these days were only guesses, and he didn't dare to take it seriously. But when he saw Jiang Huanqi, Xiaohua came to a sudden realization and was also greatly puzzled. If this Jiang Huanqi really came because of that light cyan thing, then, what medicine was Qing Fengmin selling in his gourd? Jiang Huanqi's flying speed was very fast, and he seemed to be looking for something. Soon, he disappeared from the sight of Xiaohua and the others. After he went far away, Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian walked out of their hiding place in confusion. They looked at each other, and their eyes were full of surprise. Sun Fian looked at the direction Jiang Huanqi went, bit his lips a few times, and whispered, "Fellow Taoistly, this seems to be a disciple of the Magnificent Flower sect? And this cultivator is young, and his cultivation is still shallow. I'm afraid he's a low-level disciple of the Magnificent Flower sect." Li Xiaowen was also puzzled. But, what did he come here for? Xiaohua pondered for a moment, but didn't speak. Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian had joined the heaven-forsaken sect very early on. He couldn't reveal his suspicions about Qing Fengmin. Could it be, this guy also got some news? Wants to get a share of the profits? Sun Fian's eyes flashed with ruthlessness. This kind of disciple has his own backing. Why would he want to fight with us rogue cultivators? He really deserves to die. It's just that Elder Qianzhang's reputation is too great. It's said that he can refine pills himself. If he can get his legacy, even if he can't change his sect, it's also good to secretly cultivate some divine abilities. Li Xiaowen narrowed his eyes and said thoughtfully. Then we'd better leave quickly. Don't let these ruffians take the lead. Sun Fian said anxiously. The three of them didn't dare to be negligent and flew towards the direction of the 1,000-feet peak. However, what shocked Xiaohua and the others was that before they could even reach the 1,000-feet peak, they actually encountered another dozen or so groups of cultivators. Their cultivations were roughly at the 5th or 6th level of qi condensation, and these cultivators were actually not itinerant cultivators. Something's wrong, something's definitely wrong. Sun Fian mumbled and didn't dare to fly forward anymore. If it were just Jiang Huanqi, a 5th-stage qi refining cultivator, Sun Fian and the others wouldn't be afraid of him. However, with so many cultivators coming at once, and all of them coveting Elder Thousand Zhang's legacy, the disciples of the various sects might be modest and courteous, and wouldn't make any moves before the actual operation. However, when it came to rogue cultivators, they wouldn't show any mercy. Sun Fian didn't want to lose his life before even entering the 1,000 Zhang peak. Of course, Li Xiaowen had the same idea. He frowned and was at his wits' end. Since fellow Taoist Qing said it was the 1,000-feet peak, could it be that he didn't mention the specific location? Sun Fian turned his head and asked Xiaohua. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. This silk pouch was also taken out by that senior. I didn't hear it with my own ears. That's why he called us here. Sun Fian nodded. Otherwise, fellow Taoist Qing wouldn't have to go through so much trouble to eliminate some fellow Taoists first. Elder 1,000 Feet's keepsake. Xiaohua, who hadn't spoken all this time, asked curiously, what kind of thing is this keepsake? Hee, fellow Taoist Xiao, I thought fellow Taoist Xiao was laughing silly. Li Xiaowen said with a smile, so you're still listening. There are different opinions about what Elder 1,000 Feet's keepsake is. Some say it's a cyan jade slip, some say it's a cyan magic tool, and some say it's a cyan spirit beast. Left and right, they all say it's cyan. Elder 1,000 Feet has a wood attribute constitution. Xiaohua came to a realization. That's right, so this senior's keepsake is also a wood attribute. It should be cyan. Sun Fian nodded. Oh, so that's how it is. Xiaohua nodded in his heart. Oh right, fellow Taoist Xiao, do you still have that silk bag? Take it out and see if there are any clues. Li Xiaowen suddenly said. Of course. Sun Fian heard and cried out, better take out all the silk bags for us to see. As a result, the three people's 4 silk bags didn't have any changes. Fellow Taoist Li and fellow Taoist Sun don't have fellow Taoist Qing's messaging talisman. Xiaohua said in a low voice. No, fellow Taoist Qing said that we can't use messaging talismans to find him in this treasure hunt. It was a pity that Ma Qingqing's messaging talisman in Xiaohua's hand had been used up long ago. Otherwise, he could have tried using it. We can't always stay here. Xiaohua said in a low voice, it looks like there aren't any other cultivators coming for a while. Just as he was speaking, there was the sound of something breaking through the air from afar. Xiaohua and the others hurriedly hid. When they saw the people flying over clearly, Li Xiaowen let out a long sigh of relief and said with a smile, finally, I've seen the people abandoned by the heavens. As he said this, he flew up and greeted them. Sun Fian also had a smile on his face as he followed behind Li Xiaowen. Xiaohua didn't recognize the 2 people flying over. These 2 people's appearances were a bit strange. One had a bronze face, extremely thick eyebrows, and large eyes. The other person's face was full of pockmarks, his eyes were extremely small, and he had a red nose. He looked like a drunken old man. These 2 people's cultivations were at the 5th layer of the qi refining realm. When the 2 people saw Li Xiaowen and the others, their faces were also astonished. They flew close to each other and cupped their hands in salute. Fellow Taoist Li, you've been here for a long time? Then, their gazes swept over Sun Fian and Xiaohua. Of course, these 2 people's gazes only swept over Xiaohua, who was at the 3rd layer of the qi refining realm, and only looked at Sun Fian. Fellow Taoist Zheng must be joking. Fellow Taoist and fellow Taoist Meng just passed the test with their cultivations. How could I be ahead of you? I just came here. Li Xiaowen cupped his hands and said, I introduce these 2 fellow Taoists from the heavens abandoned by the heavens. As he spoke, he told the 2 people Xiaohua and Sun Fian's names and said to Xiaohua and Sun Fian with a smile, these are the famous loose cultivators of the heavens abandoned by the heavens, fellow Taoist Zheng Chaoyang and fellow Taoist Meng Xian. This time, we've been fated to meet these 2 fellow Taoists, and we've really benefited a lot from it. Sun Fian and Xiaohua stepped forward and saluted. The 2 of them only cupped their hands for Sun Fian and only slightly nodded to Xiaohua. Li Xiaowen frowned slightly and wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't speak. Fellow Taoist Li, have you seen fellow Taoist Qing? Meng Xian asked. Not yet, I also just arrived. I haven't seen a single fellow Taoist from the heavens abandoned by the heavens. Li Xiaowen said, however, I've seen a lot of other cultivators. What's going on? Zheng Chaoyang was taken aback and asked. Li Xiaowen recounted what happened just now and said, fellow Taoist Xiao, and fellow Taoist Sun were alone and didn't dare to move forward. It's fate that we met these 2 fellow Taoists. The 5 of us will advance and retreat together, and we should be able to move forward to find fellow Taoist Qing. And, I also have the same intention. Zheng Chaoyang glanced at Meng Xian and turned to reply to Li Xiaowen. Li Xiaowen was overjoyed and cupped his hands, fellow Taoist Zheng and fellow Taoist Meng, please go first. Ha ha ha, we're all fellow Taoists of the heavens abandoned by the heavens, so why bother about who goes first? Let's go together. I want to see which sect's disciple dares to disturb the actions of the heavens abandoned by the heavens. Zheng Chaoyang smiled and flicked his sleeves. His figure fluttered slightly and flew forward. Meng Xian also smiled and cupped his hands in a somewhat strange manner. He turned his head and also prepared to fly forward. Li Xiaowen had a smile on his face as he followed closely behind the 2 of them. Upon seeing this, Sun Fian and Xiaohua retreated a body's distance, preparing to fly forward with the 3 of them. However, right at this moment, a sudden change occurred. Zheng Chaoyang and Meng Xian's figures in front abruptly turned around. The 2 of them activated binding talismans in their hands and struck Li Xiaowen and the other 2 like lightning. Li Xiaowen was delighted to see fellow Taoists of the heavens abandoned by the heavens for the first time. How could he have expected that these two would suddenly attack? Even Xiaohua was already on guard in his heart, but he absolutely didn't expect that these fellow Taoists he had just met would turn hostile so quickly. He was also struck by the binding talisman, and his 4 limbs were tightly bound. Moreover, the 3 people were bound and their magic power immediately stagnated. Their entire figures fell from the air. Li Xiaowen's mouth and tongue could still move, and he asked in a stern voice, "Fellow Taoist Zheng, what are you doing?" "What am I doing?" Zheng Chaoyang's figure whirled around and rushed towards Li Xiaowen, his mouth saying, "There's only 1,000 feet Elder's mantle. One less person fighting over it, I have a slight chance." Before his voice even fell, he had already arrived in front of Li Xiaowen. His right hand slightly reached out and grabbed Li Xiaowen's neck. "If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Qidian. Come to cast a recommendation vote or monthly vote." Chapter 1384. Zheng Chaoyang stretched out his hand and grabbed Li Xiaowen's neck. His fingers exerted force, and with a crack, Li Xiaowen's neck snapped. A stream of blood flowed from the corner of Li Xiaowen's mouth. Li Xiaowen immediately lost his life. Although Li Xiaowen was dead, his eyes were still wide open. He really didn't expect that he didn't lose his life in the southern color plain, Yulian Mountain, and other dangerous places. Instead, he came to the Thousand Zhang Peak and encountered a fellow Taoist from heaven forsaken. Yet, he was killed by this fellow Taoist he was familiar with. At the same time Zheng Chaoyang killed Li Xiaowen, Meng Xian also flew behind Sun Fian. His fist smashed into the back of Sun Fian's head. Like a ripe watermelon, Sun Fian's brain burst open. He was even less likely to live. These 2 people cooperated with tacit understanding and killed in a breath's time. Even though Xiaohua had already killed many people, but, in front of these 2 people's lightning-fast killing moves, he could only be dumbstruck. Zheng Chaoyang and Meng Xian killed Li Xiaowen and Meng Xian at almost the same time. However, they ignored Xiaohua, who was falling straight to the ground. They tore off the storage pouches on Li Xiaowen's and Meng Xian's corpses, then searched their sleeves and took out a spirit storage pouch each. "Ah! Spirit storage pouch." Meng Xian almost raised his head and laughed heartily. This Li Xiaowen is indeed rich and overbearing. As expected of a talisman master from heaven forsaken. He even has a spirit storage pouch. Zheng Chaoyang was also delighted. He threw away the corpse in his hand. Just as he was about to open the spirit storage pouch to take a look, Xiaohua, who had fallen beside him, suddenly moved. Xiaohua stretched his slender arms to the sides of his body as if he was stretching. With a burst of crackling sounds, several rays of light flickered and then were annihilated. The binding talisman on Xiaohua's body was completely destroyed by Xiaohua. Immediately, Xiaohua didn't hesitate to urge his magic power. With a speed much faster than Zheng Chaoyang and Meng Xian's, he rapidly rushed towards the 2 people. The 2 people were originally extremely close to Xiaohua. In just a breath's time, Xiaohua was already close to the 2 people. "Ah!" Hearing the sound of Xiaohua breaking through the spell with brute force, the 2 of them turned around, but by the time they turned around, Xiaohua had already rushed in front of them. "You!" The 2 of them didn't have time to be shocked by Xiaohua's speed, nor did they have time to think about how Xiaohua was able to break free of the binding talisman. One of them was just about to clench his fist, wanting to strike Xiaohua, while the other slapped his hand, wanting to take out a yellow talisman from his storage bag. But just as the 2 of them were about to move, Xiaohua's arms suddenly thrust forward, and thrust forward. Puff puff. 2 sounds came from the 2 people's bodies at the same time. Xiaohua had a devil spear head in one hand and a devil spear shaft in the other. He stabbed them from under their armpits into their chests. Black light revolved around the 2 magic tools, and the 2 lost their vitality. Their corpses fell to the ground one after the other. The only difference was that Li Xiaowen died with his eyes wide open, while Sun Fian's eyes were closed. As for the two, they died with their eyes wide open. Just like Li Xiaowen, they were also filled with disbelief and unwillingness. They really didn't expect that Xiao Hua, who was at the third level of qi condensation, would actually become their nemesis. Xiao Hua's body and mind followed the four corpses as they fell. His expression was cold as he looked at the mangled corpses on the ground. It was unknown what he was thinking in his heart. In no more than a snap of a finger, the four fellow Taoists heaven-forsaken, who were still talking and laughing just a moment ago, had lost their lives. The four fellow Taoists who had just agreed to advance and retreat together had become enemies in the blink of an eye, fighting to the death. Sigh, Xiao Hua let out a long sigh. He didn't know what he could say. Needless to say, if he didn't take advantage of this opportunity to kill Zheng Xiaoyang and Meng Xian, when the two of them were prepared to face him together, he was afraid that he would be in grave danger. The one who strikes first gains the advantage, and the one who strikes later suffers a calamity. This should be the logic. Forget it. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I hope that in your next life, it's better if you don't cultivate. As Xiao Hua spoke, he urged the magic power in his left hand and cast a spell. It was precisely the basic spell, Small Flame. With a slight flick of his finger, four sparks flew to the four corpses, immediately igniting the corpses. In no more than a moment, the corpses were burned to ashes. Looking at the burning flames, Xiao Hua was slightly proud. This flame spell was precisely the basic spell that he had comprehended in the past 10 days. Other spells were fine, but this spell related to fire, he had learned it long ago. It was just that he had the opportunity to try it out today. Soon after, Xiao Hua put the 2 spirit storage pouches on the ground into his sleeve. Then, he picked up the 4 spirit storage pouches and roughly looked at their items before putting them into his space. There was no need to mention the spirit stones, spirit herbs, and medicinal pills. What made Xiao Hua the most excited was that in addition to the spells and incomplete magic tools in Sun Fian, Zheng Chaoyang, and Meng Xian's spirit storage pouches, he actually found a fire attribute cultivation method called raising fire to the heavens in Li Xiaowen's spirit storage pouch. Although it was only at the 5th layer of qi refining, to Xiao Hua, it was absolutely an unexpected harvest. Li Xiaowen, you already have a cultivation method in your spirit storage pouch, yet you still say you don't have it. This young master is only at the 2nd layer of qi refining, and you're already so stingy. How can this young master reprimand you? Xiao Hua recalled the scene of him exchanging the spirit storage pouches with Li Xiaowen at the southern colored plains and became angry. This young master even spared you a lot of spirit stones. This is great, they all belong to this young master again. After seeing the cultivation method, Xiao Hua's previous favorable impression of Li Xiaowen had long since faded away. Then, he picked up the 4 empty spirit storage pouches and looked at them. He couldn't help but curl his lips. These 4 spirit storage pouches weren't made by the 7 Skills sect. The space inside them was at least 10 times smaller than the 2 7 Skills sect spirit storage pouches that Xiao Hua obtained before. No wonder the 7 Skills sect spirit storage pouches are calculated by top-grade spirit stones. It really makes sense. Li Xiaowen and the others' spirit storage pouches, and this young master's spirit storage pouch, really can't compare to them. Xiao Hua thought and gave up on the idea of holding onto the spirit storage pouches. He casually tossed the 4 spirit storage pouches in his hand and flew away. Without any hesitation, he quickly flew in the direction of the 1000 Zhang Peak. Without Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian, Xiao Hua seemed to have more freedom and agility. When he flew close to the 1000 Zhang Peak, he landed and found a place to hide. He carefully observed the 1000 Zhang Peak. After about the time it took to eat a meal, another dozen or so qi condensation cultivators arrived. Looking at their clothes, they didn't seem to be rogue cultivators. They were exactly like Li Xiaowen said. Each of them flew in front of the 1000 Zhang peak and took out a light green object from their spirit storage pouches. Those light green objects floated in the air and quickly flew into different caves. Those cultivators also chased after the light green objects. Strange, why does everyone have this kind of light green object? Xiao Hua was surprised. Could it be that there isn't only one? Just as he was thinking, two more figures flew in from the direction opposite of Xiao Hua. When they entered Xiao Hua's field of vision, his eyes lit up. These two people weren't bystanders. They were precisely Kai Zhuxia and Li Zongbao, whom he recognized. The two of them seemed to be using dual flying talismans. Their flying speed was extremely fast. In just a short moment, they arrived in front of the 1000 Zhang peak. The two of them stopped in midair. Li Zongbao looked around in an extremely confident and at ease manner. Kai Zhuxia's eyebrows were shining. She had a smile on her face as she said something to him. The two of them talked for a while. However, unlike the others, they didn't take out light green objects. Instead, they looked into the distance. When they looked outside the 1000 Zhang peak, Kai Zhuxia became even more anxious. These two people, what are they doing? The others have already entered the cave. Xiao Hua was very puzzled. He secretly said, could it be that they're still waiting for someone? When this thought appeared in his mind, Xiao Hua felt as if he was struck by lightning. He stood there blankly. Was there still a need to say it? Who were they waiting for? Weren't they waiting for him? Counting with his fingers, wasn't today the day he and Kai Zhuxia had agreed to come to the 1000 Zhang peak? In an instant, Xiao Hua's heart felt warm. The bit of confidence that had just been crushed by Zheng Chaoyang and Meng Xian gradually recovered. In the distance, Li Zongbao wasn't the slightest bit anxious. He only whispered something into Kai Zhuxia's ear. Kai Zhuxia's face was apologetic, as if she was explaining something. In the end, just as Kai Zhuxia bit her lip and was about to say something, Xiao Hua no longer hesitated. His figure flew up and flew towards the two people. Xiao Hua's flying speed wasn't fast. He was still around the 5th layer of the aura refining realm. Li Zongbao and Kai Zhuxia saw him from a distance. Li Zongbao's face carried a thoughtful smile. Kai Zhuxia, on the other hand, was somewhat delighted. She pulled on Li Zongbao's sleeve and the two of them went up to welcome him together. Greetings, Senior Li, greetings, fellow Taoist Kai. Xiao Hua's face carried a sincere smile as he saluted from afar. Fellow Taoist Xiao, sure enough, you didn't go back on your word. I thought fellow Taoist might not be able to come. I don't know how fellow Taoist managed to convince your sect's master. Fellow Taoist actually advanced to the 3rd layer of the aura refining realm? Before Kai Zhuxia could return the salute, she saw the changes in Xiao Hua's cultivation level. Extremely astonished, she said, half a year ago, fellow Taoist Xiao was still in the 1st layer of the aura refining realm. In just half a year, fellow Taoist Xiao advanced to the 3rd layer of the aura refining realm. This is truly gratifying, truly worthy of congratulations. Afterwards, she glanced at Li Zongbao again and sighed, it's still better to be a disciple of a sect. Fellow Taoist Zhuxia, everyone has their own fate. That's all. Li Zongbao slightly shook his head and smiled. Oh, right. Fellow Taoist Xiao, I'd like to introduce you. This is fellow Taoist Li Zongbao from the Utmost Happiness sect. Kai Zhuxia suddenly realized. Fellow Taoist Zhuxia, I've met fellow Taoist Xiao before. Li Zongbao laughed. You've met fellow Taoist Xiao before? Kai Zhuxia was very puzzled. She turned her head and asked. Of course. However, I didn't expect that the cultivator at the 1st layer of the aura refining realm, who hadn't joined the sect yet, would actually step forward bravely and save a cultivator at the 5th layer of the aura refining realm. Li Zongbao smiled and said in a very reserved tone, actually, as early as when fellow Taoist Zhuxia mentioned fellow Taoist Xiao, I vaguely felt that, the Xiao Hua from Shang Huaming that I saved was the same Xiao Hua who saved fellow Taoist Zhuxia. I wouldn't dare. I was just lucky. Xiao Hua hurriedly explained. Fellow Taoist Zongbao, what's going on? Kai Zhuxia asked curiously, but then she exclaimed, oh, fellow Taoist Xiao, wasn't Shang Huaming's entire sect annihilated? Fellow Taoist. Chapter 1385. That's right, I am really a loose cultivator now. Xiao Hua whispered with a gloomy expression. Kai Zhuxia was extremely surprised. She turned her head to look at Li Zongbao and comforted Xiao Hua, fellow Taoist Xiao, as the saying goes, don't ask where a hero comes from, miracles happen naturally. With your character, the heavens will naturally take care of you. It won't be difficult for you to leave your name in the cultivation world of our Xiaoyu continent. Moreover, fellow Taoist Xiao was only at the first layer of the aura refining realm half a year ago. In this short period of time, you can advance to the third layer of the aura refining realm. As long as you practice diligently, whether you're in a sect or a loose cultivator, you'll have a bright future. Just as Kai Zhuxia was comforting Xiao Hua, Li Zongbao's expression was somewhat strange. Xiao Hua felt a divine sense sweep past him. Then, he heard Li Zongbao ask, fellow Taoist Xiao, last time I met you in the Imitation Mountain Range, there was no news of Shang Huaming's destruction. But a month later, there was news of Shang Huaming's destruction and the 100 Herb sect occupying Yellow Flower Ridge. Fellow Taoist, how did you escape? Fellow Taoist Zongbao, this isn't the place to talk. Why don't we enter the 1,000 feet peak and then explain in detail? Kai Zhuxia rebuked. I'll listen to fellow Taoist Zhuxia's instructions. Li Zongbao didn't object and only smiled. While speaking, Kai Zhuxia patted her storage pouch and took out a palm-sized, strangely shaped, light green jade object. It seemed to be in the shape of a wild beast. Kai Zhuxia slightly shook the jade object in front of Xiao Hua. Just as she was about to activate it with her magic power, Xiao Hua hurriedly said, fellow Taoist Kai, please wait. Is there something else, fellow Taoist Xiao? Kai Zhuxia stopped and asked curiously. Xiao Hua was very apologetic. He cupped his hands and said, actually, there's something else I haven't told you. What is it? Li Zongbao asked indifferently. It's like this, Senior Li, fellow Taoist Kai, although Junior is already a loose cultivator, I have joined the Heaven Forsaken. Junior came to the 1,000 feet peak because of the Heaven Forsaken arrangement. Junior didn't especially come to meet fellow Taoist Kai. Xiao Hua said these words and his heart relaxed. Senior Li. Fellow Taoist Xiao is Heaven Forsaken. An itinerant cultivator forsaken by the heavens has also come to the 1,000 Zhang Peak. Kai Zhuxia was startled at first, then she suddenly understood and turned to look at Li Zongbao. Li Zongbao's eyes flashed with a strange light as he thoughtfully looked at Xiao Hua. After a while, he asked, then. Fellow Taoist Xiao means, you don't want to enter with us? The other rogue cultivators who are only here to wait for the heavens to abandon them? This junior has the intention to follow the two seniors in, but, this matter still needs to be explained to the two seniors. Xiao Hua shook his head. Junior has been here for half a day. Apart from the two fellow Taoists accompanying me and the other two fellow Taoists, I haven't seen any other loose cultivators abandoned by the heavens. There are 4 other fellow Taoists? Li Zongbao was slightly taken aback. He looked around vigilantly. Alas, the other 4 fellow Taoists have already perished together. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. Kai Zhuxia and Li Zongbao looked at each other. Kai Zhuxia also sighed and shook her head. I'm afraid it's because of old man 1,000 Zhang's legacy. Before they even entered the 1,000 Zhang Peak, they already started fighting. What about fellow Taoist Xiao? You're already at the third layer of the qi refining realm, so you're also a loose cultivator. Shang Huaming's cultivation method. I'm afraid you don't have it anymore, right? Compared to when you met fellow Taoist Zhuxia half a year ago, things have changed. What does fellow Taoist Xiao plan to do? Li Zongbao said with a chuckle. When Kai Zhuxia heard this, she suddenly understood. Doubt appeared on her face. Of course, Kai Zhuxia invited Xiao Hua to the Thousand Zhang Peak because Xiao Hua was a disciple of a sect and wouldn't fight with her for old man Thousand Zhang's legacy. Moreover, Xiao Hua's cultivation was also low, so she could control it. And, the most important thing was that she was alone at that time and wanted someone to accompany her. At that time, Xiao Hua was extremely suitable. But now, everything had changed. Xiao Hua didn't have his sect's cultivation method, Xiao Hua also needed old man Thousand Zhang's legacy, and the most embarrassing thing was that Kai Zhuxia now had Li Zongbao as her companion. When Xiao Hua flew over, he had already made up his mind. He cupped his hands and said, "Junior just came over to explain things to seniors. I already obtained a cultivation method here, so I can cultivate to the 5th layer of the qi refining realm. From the 3rd layer of the qi refining realm to the 5th layer of the qi refining realm, Junior doesn't know how many years it will take. Therefore, if there are other cultivation methods in old man Thousand Zhang's legacy that seniors don't need, Junior won't refuse. If there aren't any, Junior won't be greedy and will just give some medicinal pills to Junior." Of course, as Senior Li said, everything has changed. If it's not convenient for fellow Taoist Kai to enter with Junior, then Junior has nothing to say. When Kai Zhuxia saw Xiao Hua's magnanimous expression and spoke without hesitation, the trace of hesitation in her heart disappeared. She smiled and said, "Since I took the initiative to invite fellow Taoist Xiao half a year ago, how can I refuse this time? Moreover, with fellow Taoist Zongbao here, what do I have to be afraid of?" As she spoke, Kai Zhuxia smiled like a flower and turned to look at Li Zongbao. Li Zongbao smiled and nodded slightly. He turned to Xiao Hua and said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, do you still remember what I said to you in the Royal Fang Mountains? All honest words have to be kept in your heart. If you tell the whole truth, you won't have the opportunity first. If you're not being schemed against, then, you won't be able to refuse." Xiao Hua's face was full of smiles. He bowed and said, "Junior is untalented. I'll have to rely on seniors to guide me on this trip to the Thousand Zhang Peak." Forget it, forget it. You're so open and aboveboard that you're practically better than I, a disciple of the utmost happiness faction. If you don't explain, how would I know that you're a rogue cultivator?" Li Zongbao flicked his big sleeve and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhuxia, let's go in. After we enter, fellow Taoist Xiao will tell I in detail about Shang Huaming and Tian Qi. I'm very interested in this Tian Qi." "Interested in Tian Qi?" Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. Suddenly, a thought appeared in his mind. This Li Zongbao. I'm afraid he didn't come to the Thousand Zhang Peak purely to escort Kai Zhuxia, right? Yes, fellow Taoist Zongbao. As Kai Zhuxia spoke, she urged the magic power in her hand. The light green jade artifact emitted a light green brilliance. The beast shape gradually became vivid. In the blink of an eye, the little beast formed by the brilliance suddenly jumped up and flew towards the top of the Thousand Zhang Peak. Li Zongbao and the others didn't dare to be negligent. They flew up and chased after it. When they were about to reach the top of the mountain, the light green little beast entered one of the caves and disappeared. Li Zongbao and the others were extremely fast and also went in. When Xiao Hua and the others flew into the Thousand Zhang Peak, the entire Thousand Zhang Peak returned to its usual silence. Another half a day passed. When the sun set in the west, hundreds of thousands of cultivators suddenly appeared with the Thousand Zhang Peak as the center. Then, they all flew into the air and swarmed towards the Thousand Zhang Peak. Looking at the clothes of these cultivators, they were not uniform and had different styles. Moreover, their cultivations were all around the 4th or 5th level of qi refining. There were very few above the 5th level. They were the rogue cultivators Xiaohua had been waiting for. On the east side of the 1000-zhang peak, under the red light of the setting sun, Ma Qingcheng and a few other rogue cultivators were accompanying Qing Fengmin. Qing Fengmin's thick black eyebrows were especially bright under the sunlight. His bright red face was even more oily. His eyes were looking around with great satisfaction. The corners of his mouth were slightly raised, looking extremely proud. Fellow Taoist Qing, this 1000-zhang peak treasure hunt is really a big deal. It looks like the situation is comparable to the ink shadow Black Forest. Ma Qingcheng's face was also filled with excitement. He couldn't help but say. More than that, the requirements of the ink shadow Black Forest are very high. The number of fellow Taoists who can participate is still limited. How can it be compared to this time? Only fellow Taoists with some cultivation can participate. Fellow Taoist Qing can be said to be beneficial to rogue cultivators. Another fat cultivator beside him echoed. Qing Fengmin smiled proudly. Then, a trace of pity appeared on his face. He waved his hand and said, "Alas, I know that we rogue cultivators are in a difficult situation. I want to give ordinary fellow Taoists more opportunities. But, after all, there is only the legacy of the 1000-zhang old man. There are too many monks and too little gruel. If all the rogue cultivators abandoned by the heavens come, it will definitely attract the covetous eyes of some other sections. So, I set up some thresholds." Another cultivator with sparse hair and a sloppy Taoist robe said with a smile, "In the cultivation world, it has always been natural selection. If everything was 100% certain, wouldn't the sky be filled with flying immortals? Fellow Taoist Qing, you don't have to blame yourself. But, alas, some places are really cruel. In I's group, 6 out of 10 fellow Taoists died in dangerous places." Ma Qingcheng looked at the approaching rogue cultivators and sighed, "I'm afraid the other fellow Taoists are also like this, right?" Qing Fengmin listened and did not answer. He squinted his eyes and looked at the 1000-zhang peak in the distance. In the light of the setting sun, 2 faint flames were burning in his eyes. After flying for another incense stick's worth of time, Qing Fengmin, Ma Qingcheng, and the others arrived in front of the 100-zhang peak. Qing Fengmin stopped and looked at the last ray of sunset before asking, "Fellow Taoist Ma, the time is just right, right?" "Fellow Taoist Qing, it is the time agreed in the silk bag." Ma Qingcheng raised his head and looked in the distance. All the rogue cultivators were flying in the air around them, eager to have a try. "Is there a fellow Taoist who is not abandoned by the heavens?" "Fellow Taoist Qing, there is more than one token of the 1000-zhang old man. Some are real and some are fake. Every year at this time, some fellow Taoists who have obtained the token will come. Just now, I'm afraid there are dozens of other sects or rogue cultivators who are not abandoned by the heavens. Yes, I left a message in the silk bag. After telling them the location of the 1000-zhang peak, I told them not to arrive first. Just wait for sunset. The rogue cultivators of the heavens will come together. Even if we encounter other cultivators, we have the advantage in numbers. There is no need to be afraid." Qing Fengmin said with a smile. "How do we enter? Please tell us, fellow Taoist Qing." Ma Qingcheng cupped his hands and said, "Fellow Taoist Ma, you send a voice-transmitting talisman and gather the fellow Taoists who opened the last silk bag in each group. The other fellow Taoists will be divided into 20 groups. Yes, I will do it right away." Ma Qingcheng nodded and waved to the several cultivators behind him. Everyone followed. Chapter 1386. In a cave near the top of the 1000-zhang peak, Xiaohua followed Li Zongbao and Kaizhuxia into the cave. He saw the light green jade object on the ground of the cave, looking dull. "Huh. Xiaohua saw Kai Zhuxia pick up the strange-looking jade beast and said curiously, "This thing, why did it fall down after leading us to the cave? I thought I could find the 1,000 old man's inheritance by flying with it. If that's the case, we can just find a cave and enter it." He, fellow Taoist Xiao is thinking too simply. Kai Zhuxia put the jade beast into her storage bag and said with a smile, "I won't hide it from fellow Taoist Xiao. This jade beast was obtained by I in the Royal Imitation Mountain Range. It was also because of this that I was chased by Pai Lan and the twin bears. I didn't tell fellow Taoist Xiao the truth that day, so I hope fellow Taoist Xiao can forgive me." Xiaohua smiled bitterly. Fellow Taoist Kai is overthinking. Fellow Taoist told I the time and place, and even brought I to the 1,000 peak. Isn't this telling the truth to I? How could I not know the severity of the matter? Fellow Taoist Xiao is right. That day, I didn't know fellow Taoist's identity, and I was afraid that it would cause some misunderstanding between us. I invited fellow Taoist to come here to return a favor. Kai Zhuxia nodded and explained, fellow Taoist Xiao should also know that the 1,000 old man was good at refining pills and refining tools. Before he passed away, he hid his inheritance in the 1,000 peak and refined some strange jade beasts. These jade beasts are both real and fake. Only one of them can lead the fated person into the real treasure cave and obtain the old man's inheritance. As for this jade beast, it said that its function isn't to lead the cultivator to the real treasure cave, but to guide the cultivator at a crucial time. For example, there are probably hundreds of caves on the 1,000 peak, and there must be mountain paths crisscrossing inside. It's very complicated. This jade beast only points out the location of the cave, and after we enter the cave, we have to rely on ourselves. The 1,000 old man died about 1,000 years ago, but, until now, many cultivators have obtained this green jade beast, but I've never heard of anyone inheriting the old man's inheritance. Furthermore, this jade beast appears every year. Li Zongbao said leisurely, "This legend is really wonderful. If I didn't have the complete cultivation method of the Utopia faction, perhaps I would also covet it." Fellow Taoist Zongbao, since you've accompanied I here, how can I let you return empty-handed? If you can find old man 1,000 Feet's legacy in alms bowl, you can take whatever you like. Kai Zhuxia said with a smile. When Xiaohua heard this, the expression on his face didn't change, but in his heart, he was slightly worried. He originally thought that since Li Zongbao came here to accompany Kai Zhuxia, he wouldn't care about the 1,000 peaks things. He might even be able to get something from Kai Zhuxia, but if Li Zongbao also wanted to divide it, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to obtain any benefits. Forget it. Since I'm following her, I'll just let it be. Xiaohua comforted himself. Thank you for your kindness, fellow Taoist Zhuxia. Li Zongbao said with a smile, however, searching for treasures depends on fate. Although the three of us came here together, maybe each of us has different encounters. If the three of us find something in the 1,000 peak together, I will definitely compensate you too if I take it. No, we still need fellow Taoist Zongbao to take care of us along the way. Let fellow Taoist Zongbao make the decision first. Kai Zhuxia hurriedly declined. Xiaohua smiled bitterly in his heart and didn't say anything. Seeing the two of them giving way to each other, it seemed that he was an extra person and was very embarrassed. In fact, wasn't that the case? Li Zongbao didn't seem to want to talk to Kai Zhuxia about this. He glanced at Xiaohua, then at the pitch-black cave in the distance. He took out 3 moonstones and gave them to the two of them, saying, "It is said that the path to the cave is long and winding. Fellow Taoist Xiao, if there is nothing wrong, please tell this humble Taoist and the others about your situation in the past 6 months." This humble Taoist is very curious as to how Shang Huaming suddenly disappeared. Yes, I'm also very curious. Fellow Taoist Xiao, you haven't broken through to the first layer of the aura refining realm. How did you suddenly break through to the 3rd layer of the aura refining realm after coming out of Shang Huaming? Kai Zhuxia also clapped her hands and applauded. Xiao Hua frowned. This kind of matter, he really didn't want to tell others about it. However, he immediately had an idea. Perhaps being on good terms with Li Zongbao and gaining his sympathy might be beneficial for my revenge. Moreover, it's a bit strange for Qing Fengmin to give the jade beast to Jiang Huanqi for no reason. If I tell them, it might arouse their suspicions. Thus, Kai Zhuxia led the way, Xiao Hua stood in the middle, and Li Zongbao brought up the rear. As the three of them slowly walked into the Thousand Zhang Peak, Xiao Hua slowly told them about his situation. In another cave on the Thousand Zhang Peak, Jiang Huanqi of the Shanghua sect was also pleasantly surprised. He picked up the green jade beast from the ground and carefully examined it in front of his eyes. He laughed softly and said, "That old thing abandoned by the heavens really has eyes but can't see the good stuff. He can only be a rogue cultivator for the rest of his life. He already has the token of the Thousand Zhang Peak, but he actually gave it away to someone else. I deserve my heaven-defying luck." Not only did I obtain the exquisite grass, but I also have the opportunity to obtain a golden core cultivation method. As long as I bring these things back to the sect, do you think the elders won't reward me handsomely? Afterwards, he carefully put away the jade beast, took out the moonlight stones, and slowly walked along the mountain path under his feet. In many other caves, the same thing was happening. Every cultivator's face was filled with joy, as if they were the real fated ones. Outside the Thousand Zhang Peak, Ma Qingqing led 40 to 50 rogue cultivators to Qing Fengmin's side and reported, "Fellow Taoist Qing, I have brought all the fellow Taoists who opened the last silk bag. Please give me your orders." Qing Fengmin nodded and looked at the people behind Ma Qingqing with satisfaction. He said, "Fellow Taoists, you've worked hard." Then he turned his head and pointed to another rogue cultivator that Ma Qingqing didn't know. He said, "Before we enter the Thousand Zhang Peak, I would like to introduce a new fellow Taoist who has recently joined the Heavens Forsaken. Fellow Taoist Luo Jiesin." The rogue cultivator's face was withered and yellow. He was also at the 5th layer of qi refining. He flew to Qing Fengmin and bowed. "Greetings, fellow Taoists." After everyone returned the greeting, Qing Fengmin smiled and said to the puzzled crowd, "Actually, I should have explained to you earlier. It was because of fellow Taoist Luo that we had the opportunity to explore the Thousand Zhang Peak." This is... It wasn't just the crowd that was shocked. Even Ma Qingqing, a veteran rogue cultivator in the Heavens Forsaken, was slightly stunned. I'm sure fellow Taoists are all confused." Qing Fengmin laughed. "Fellow Taoist Luo came to Jingbua City 2 months ago after I, fellow Taoist Ma, and the others returned. Fellow Taoist Luo joined the Heavens Forsaken under a condition. He didn't have to contribute any cultivation method, nor did he have to make talismans or refine pills. It was because he could take out this." Qing Fengmin patted his storage bag and took out a green jade beast. "Fellow Taoist Qing, didn't you have one of these before?" Ma Qingqing was stunned when he saw the jade beast and exclaimed. "Of course, I also got this before, but I didn't expect this thing to be the token of the Thousand Zhang Peak." Qing Fengmin nodded with a smile and didn't seem dispirited. "Fellow Taoist Qing is so righteous. You actually lost an opportunity for us. We are very grateful." Han Fei stepped out from the crowd and bowed gratefully. "Qiao Fengyue didn't show up. I didn't know that day, but now that fellow Taoist Luo mentioned it, I also understood." Qing Fengmin laughed. "I also didn't expect such an ordinary thing to be the token of the legendary Thousand Zhang Peak. However, there's nothing to regret." Qing Fengmin waved his hand and said, "I lost one, but fellow Taoist Luo actually gave me 10 more. 10. Everyone was stunned. Ordinary people would be very lucky to get one of these things, but fellow Taoist Luo actually got 10 of them. This was really inconceivable. Cough, was also a coincidence. Luo Jiasen cupped his hands and said, I found these 10 strange jade beasts in a very small market in the country of Lian. Because they didn't have any special effects, they were sold as ordinary jade pendants. Presumably, the cultivators of the country of Lian didn't know much about the 1000 Zhang Peak in the country of Shi, so no cultivator recognized them. I only spent 1 mid-grade spirit stone to buy them. Ah! Ha ha ha, everyone was stunned at first, but then they burst out laughing. I know that my cultivation is not enough, but these jade beasts. I only need 1. Later, I heard about Tian Qi's good reputation, so I found fellow Taoist Qing. Luo Jiasen said with some embarrassment. Everyone was enlightened. Of course, such good things, 1 was the most suitable. 2 would be troublesome. If you took 10, it would be troublesome. Fellow Taoist Luo's good luck is also Tian Qi's good luck. Fellow Taoist Luo's joining is Tian Qi's opportunity. His good luck will definitely bring my strength to a higher level. Qing Fengmin laughed and said, if any of you can get the 1000 Zhang Peak's legacy, then you will be one of my future masters. At that time, don't forget about me, and don't forget fellow Taoist Luo. Okay. Everyone answered loudly, as if they were all determined to get the 1000 Zhang Peak's legacy. Okay, fellow Taoists, don't be happy too early. This 1000 Zhang Peak's legend has been around for 1000 years, and no one has ever succeeded. We just have a chance. Ha, fellow Taoist Qing, in the past, only a few people came to get the 1000 Zhang Peak's legacy. This time, there are hundreds and thousands of us. Even if there are some difficulties, won't it be easy for us to overcome them? Ha ha ha, fellow Taoist Ma's words are exactly what I want. It is also my creed. Isn't it our advantage in numbers? Qing Fengmin laughed and said, fellow Taoist Luo, please send out the other tokens. Fellow Taoist Ma will help. 2 teams will enter 1 cave. Chapter 1387. Inside the 1000 feet peak, the mountain path was very long. Xiao Hua and the others walked for nearly an hour and still couldn't see the end. Along the way, the stone walls on both sides of the mountain path were extremely dry. There wasn't any moss or the like. Occasionally, some startled bats would flap their wings and make a little noise. Apart from that, there were only the slightly hurried footsteps of the 3 people. Xiao Hua's low voice and Li Zongbao's occasional questions echoed in the stone cave and traveled very far. Alas, fellow cultivator Zhao's experience is really pitiful. Hearing that Xiao Hua's Shang Huaming had been inexplicably destroyed by the 100 Herbs sect, Kaizhuxia was very sympathetic. This 100 Herbs sect is really shameless. On one hand, they used the banner of the alliance, on the other hand, they secretly attacked. Actually, this kind of method is not the first time in the cultivation world. It can only be said that sect leader Xiao was too rigid and couldn't accept many disciples. This was why he lacked help at the critical moment and was taken advantage of by the 100 Herbs sect. In the end, Li Zongbao shook his head slightly. In the cultivation world, the most important thing is strength. It's like this for individuals, and even more so for sects. Every day, countless cultivators died, and countless cultivators stepped into the qi refinement realm. At the same time, no one knew how many sects had been established and how many had perished. Even if my Utopia faction didn't work hard and increase our strength, I'm afraid that in 100 or 1,000 years, we would also end up like this. After pondering for a moment, Li Zongbao said again, if there's no other reason, fellow cultivator Xiao, the destruction of Shang Huaming was probably done by the 100 Herbs sect. But as for the 10,000 poison sects attack and then no news, I can't guess the reason. As for Shang Huaming, fellow cultivator Xiao, I'm afraid you can only think of a way. The other sects have no reason to stand up for Shang Huaming. That's right, Unless your sect master Shao has an extremely close senior, and this senior has the power to destroy 100 Herbs Gate. Oh, and your senior sister Shao also has to step forward. Kai Zhuxia agreed. Sigh. Xiao Hua sighed softly. At this point, how could Xiao Xianrui stand out? Kai Zhuxia was silent for a moment before she asked, by the way, as fellow Daoist Xiao said, fellow Daoist Zong Bao, Qing Feng Min is really interesting. On one hand, he casually gave away Old Man Thousand Feet's keepsake. On the other hand, he organized a group of rogue cultivators to search for Old Man Thousand Feet's legacy. On the other hand, he created so many mysteries. Is he so confident that he'll be able to find Old Man Thousand Feet's legacy? This. I don't know. Li Zongbao shook his head slightly. If something is out of the ordinary, it must be a demon. So many loose practitioners from Heaven Forsaken came to look for Old Man 100 Zhang's technique, but over 100 of them entered a cave. Speaking of this, Li Zongbao's heart flashed, and he whispered in surprise, oh, could it be that Qing Feng Min has more than one token? Was that why he was willing to give one away? Moreover, he was able to gather all the rogue cultivators in Heaven Forsaken. Of course, it's true. Kai Zhuxia covered her mouth and laughed. Fellow Daoist Zongbao is indeed amazing. I never thought of this kind of situation. Hearing this, Xiao Hua was somewhat speechless. He had long seen many cultivators each take a light green brilliance and enter different caves. In his heart, he faintly guessed that Qing Feng Min would have more than one jade beast. Presumably, Kai Zhuxia had been scheming for a long time. She even knew that his great strength was advantageous to her in treasure hunting, so how could she not know that he had more than one jade beast? Li Zongbao smiled but didn't answer. Xiao Hua felt that the atmosphere was somewhat awkward. He was already somewhat regretting it now. It would have been better if he had followed Li Zongbao into the cave. In the somewhat ambiguous conversation between the two people, he was really out of step. He only heard Li Zongbao sigh and say, actually. I came to this 1,000 Zhang peak. Xiao Hua stared blankly and said inwardly, this Li Zongbao came to this 1,000 Zhang peak. Could it be that there's some other reason? Just as Xiao Hua was about to ask, Kai Zhuxia cried out in pleasant surprise in front of him, quickly look, the cave is at the end. Xiao Hua raised his head and looked. Sure enough, in front of Kai Zhuxia's moonstone was a rather large pitch-black space. Wait a moment. Li Zongbao shouted in a low voice, and his figure flew in front of Kai Zhuxia. It turns out that it can fly. I thought we could only walk. Xiao Hua secretly curled his lips in his heart. He had always been very curious why they didn't use the flight talisman. He thought that they couldn't fly. Li Zongbao flew to the front and swept his divine sense. He clearly saw the situation inside the space, and then said, it seems that this is the key to finding treasures. As he spoke, he clapped his hand and took out a few moonstones from his storage bag. He casually threw them, and they were embedded in the stone walls of the space. When Xiao Hua walked into this space, he clearly saw the situation around him with the help of the moonstone's brilliance. This was an oval space of about 10 feet. On the stone wall opposite Xiao Hua, there were 3 similar stone caves. Each stone cave was tightly blocked by a stone door. Xiao Hua knew that Li Zongbao had already used his divine sense to check the entire space, so he followed Kai Zhuxia to the front of the 3 stone doors with ease. First, he looked at the 3 stone doors with his naked eyes. Kai Zhuxia frowned slightly, turned her head and said, fellow Daoist Zongbao, can you see the clues of the stone doors? Li Zongbao smiled bitterly, I have already seen it with my divine sense. The 3 stone doors are not different from the stone doors. They are exactly the same. Xiao Hua bit his lips and said, seniors, we have been in the stone cave for a long time. According to the way we have been going down, we should have already gone deep into the ground. The sudden appearance of 3 stone doors, isn't it a little strange? Kaixuoxia suddenly patted her forehead and said, "Fellow Taoists, please wait a moment." Soon after, Kaixuoxia patted her storage bag and took out the jade beast she had just used. Sure enough, as soon as the jade beast was taken out of the storage bag, it immediately emitted a light green brilliance and flew out of Kaixuoxia's hand. It flew straight to the middle of the stone door and stuck to a dent in the stone door, motionless. When Xiaohua looked at it, sure enough, the stone door was in the shape of a strange beast. The jade beast was embedded in the stone door and fit perfectly. Anyone would know that this stone door was the place they should go. Fellow Taoist Xiao. Kaixuoxia turned her head and said, "It is said that this stone door can only be opened by someone with great magic power or unparalleled strength. So, I ask fellow Taoist Xiao to help." I know." Xiaohua responded indifferently. He walked to the front and looked up and down. There was a dent about 3 inches below the stone door. It seemed to be the place where the stone door could be raised with one's hand. "Wait a moment, fellow Taoist Xiao." Li Zongbao shouted in a low voice. "What?" "Fellow Taoist Zongbao." Kaixuoxia said curiously. Li Zongbao ignored her and walked to the front of the stone door. He looked at the 3 stone doors again and again before stopping in front of the stone door in the middle. First, he carefully looked at it with his naked eyes, then swept it a few times with his divine sense, and whispered, "Fellow Taoists, please step back a little." After Xiaohua and Kaixuoxia stepped back a few steps, Li Zongbao took a deep breath and circulated the true qi in his body. He urged his magic power, made a gesture in his hand, and hit the stone door. The stone door made a zhila sound. As Li Zongbao poured his magic power into it, the stone door actually slowly rose up. Seeing this, Kaixuoxia's face showed joy, but before her smile stayed on her face for half a moment, Li Zongbao's face turned dark red. The stone door first made a kacha sound and stopped there. Then, with a loud puchi sound, the entire stone door fell to the ground quickly, stirring up a cloud of dust. Fellow Taoist Zongbao. Kaixuoxia was worried and hurriedly asked. "I am fine." Li Zongbao shook his head and said, "This method of exchanging magic power for strength, I am not proficient in it. I am afraid that only Foundation establishment cultivators can open it." "No way." Kaixuoxia immediately smiled bitterly. "If only Foundation establishment cultivators can open it, who would come? Hee, I only said this stone door. Moreover, I did not prepare the stone door giant strength talisman. I am afraid that this stone door will require fellow Taoist Zhao's strength." Li Zongbao said with a smile. "And, 2 seniors, please wait a moment. Let this junior take a look." As Xiaohua spoke, he walked to the front of the stone door and placed his hand in the groove of the stone door. He exerted strength with one arm, and the stone door creaked as it was lifted up by him bit by bit. "Fellow Taoist Zhao's strength is amazing." Li Zongbao also praised. Strangely, after Xiaohua lifted the stone door into the air, it did not fall down again. A gust of mountain wind blew out from behind the stone door, causing the robes of the 3 people to flutter. However, when Xiaohua let go of his arm and shifted his gaze from the stone door to the pitch-black space behind the stone door, a burst of coldness and fear suddenly came from the bottom of his heart. This. Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air. "Let's go, fellow Taoist Zongbao, fellow Taoist Xiao. Let's quickly enter the cave. Perhaps the 1,000 Zhang elders' legacy is in this cave." Kaixuoxia said happily. She pulled Li Zongbao and was about to walk into the cave. Li Zongbao and Kaixuoxia walked a few steps and saw Xiaohua standing straight at the side without moving half a step. They were both surprised. "Fellow Taoist Xiao, is there something wrong?" Xiaohua took a deep breath and nodded. "This junior feels that there is something wrong behind this stone door. It is better not to go in." "A feeling of inappropriateness?" Kaixuoxia was slightly surprised. She had just taken out the light green jade beast from the stone door. She asked curiously, "Did fellow Taoist find something strange?" Xiaohua smiled bitterly. "This is indeed not. I just feel that there is something wrong." Then, he looked around and said, "Why don't we open these two stone doors and take a look?" "Yes, fellow Taoist, please." Kaixuoxia nodded. After Xiaohua opened the two stone doors, Kaixuoxia said with a smile, "What do you think?" "Fellow Taoist Xiao, behind these three stone doors is the same pitch-black space. Which one do you think we should go?" "This. I think that the left and the right are all fine. As for the middle one, I think that we should rely on the jade beast's guidance and go through the middle stone door." Kaixuoxia pondered for a moment and said, "What is fellow Taoist Zongbao's choice?" "Ha, didn't I already say earlier? Everything is up to fate. Since there is a choice before the three stone doors, it naturally depends on one's luck. Others can't force it." Li Zongbao smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, which one do you want to choose?" If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian.com to vote for it. Chapter 1388. In fact, ever since he entered the cave, Xiaohua had some doubts in his heart. He had long wanted to find a chance to separate from the two. Not to mention that the two chattering made Xiaohua a little uncomfortable. The key point was that following the two, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to get any benefits. Now that he had a choice, Xiaohua faintly felt that the mountain wind from the middle of the cave was somewhat bloody. This kind of bloody smell wasn't smelled from the mouth and nose, but from a kind of instinct. After hearing Li Zongbao's words, Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, "Many thanks to the two seniors for your guidance. This junior doesn't dare to have too many extravagant hopes for the 1,000-feet-old man's legacy. I'll just walk around casually and get some other things, and I'll be satisfied." Seeing this, Kaixuoxia didn't urge him to stay. She nodded and said, "I understand fellow Taoist Zhao's meaning. Since it's fellow Taoist Zhao's choice, then I can only respect it. I hope fellow Taoist Zhao will be careful. We'll meet again after we leave the 1,000-feet peak." Li Zongbao also looked at Xiaohua and nodded slightly, saying, "Fellow Taoist Zhao, be careful." Then, Li Zongbao followed Kaixuoxia into the cave. When the two disappeared into the darkness and the moonlight disappeared, Xiaohua looked around and casually walked to the cave on the right. Outside the 1,000-feet peak, Luo Jiesin took out 9 light green jade beasts from his storage bag. Everyone's eyes were wide open. Even Ma Qingqing couldn't hide the excitement in his heart when he took the jade beasts and flew to the front of each team to give the jade beasts to the temporarily appointed team leaders. Qing Fengmin clapped his hands and said, "Well, fellow Taoists, use your magic power to activate the jade beasts in your hands. The jade beasts will guide you to the correct cave. It's best not to fly inside the cave. It's said that if you walk slowly, you can avoid some of the restrictions inside the cave." As soon as his voice fell, the 9 jade beasts almost simultaneously turned into light green brilliance and flew to different places on the 1,000-feet peak. Several of them even went around to the other side of the 1,000-feet peak. How could heaven-forsaken's itinerant cultivators be courteous at this time? Each of them activated their flying talismans and flew towards the 1,000-zhang peak. However, there were too many itinerant cultivators following behind each light. When they entered the cave one by one, it still took a lot of time. "Everyone, it's time for us to enter." Qing Fengmin looked at the surrounding people and threw the jade beast in his hand with a smile. A pale green light flew towards the top of the 1,000-zhang peak and entered the cave that was very close to the cave that Xiaohua and the others had entered. Qing Fengmin activated the flying talisman, and the dozens of people around him followed. When everyone entered the cave, the whole sky was already dark, and the sound of the wind was everywhere. It was quiet, as if nothing had happened. Xiaohua entered the cave. Since Kaizhuxia wasn't leading the way in front, he held the moonstone to his left and right. He also took out a stack of fireball talismans and held them in front of his chest. His eyes were fixed in front of him, ready to shoot out a fireball if there was any sudden change. However, after walking for the time it took to finish a meal, the entire mountain path was still quiet and there was nothing out of the ordinary. Is this just an ordinary cave? Xiaohua slightly furrowed his brows, feeling somewhat unresigned in his heart. Right at this moment, an extremely short sharp howl suddenly rang out. Approximately 30 meters in front of Xiaohua's head, the howl was fleeting. Ah! Xiaohua was startled to the point that the hairs on his body stood up. This howl was really sudden and also really sinister. I'm afraid there's going to be a good show. Xiaohua took a deep breath and narrowed his eyes. He held the fireball talisman in his hand a few times, slowed down his pace, and steadily walked forward. In just a moment, Xiaohua was close to the place where the sound came from. However, to Xiaohua's surprise, this was only a crossroads. The left, right, and the front were all exactly the same caves, and he didn't find anything out of the ordinary. Xiaohua, whose heart had already been stretched taut, saw this situation and couldn't help but be startled. He stood there for the time it took to drink a cup of tea, looking left, right, front, and back. Then, he walked towards the cave in front of him. However, just as he was about to take a step, a sharp sound of wind came from behind him. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly turned around, however, there was nothing behind him. In the light of the moonstone, it was just as silent as when he passed by. The sharp sound of wind just now was inexplicably gone. Strange! Xiaohua secretly cried out in alarm. Then, he took out a few iron cloak talismans, weak water talismans, and other talismans from his storage pouch and used them on himself. Then, Xiaohua walked forward while paying attention to his surroundings. After half a meal's time, nothing happened. However, in front of Xiaohua's eyes, there were two identical mountain paths, one to the left and the other to the right. This time, Xiaohua had no choice but to make a choice. However, the two mountain paths didn't give him much of a feeling. Therefore, he could only casually choose the mountain path on the left and walk in. However, this mountain path was very short. In less than the time it took for an incense stick to burn, there was no road in front of him, revealing a space of about 1 zhang. 1 zhang equals 3.33 m. There was nothing in this space, only the ground was very smooth. Xiaohua held the moonstone and looked at the stone walls around him. He didn't find anything out of the ordinary. He couldn't help but sigh and say to himself, could it be that I've really reached the end? But just as Xiaohua was about to leave, he suddenly woke up with a start. He immediately raised the moonstone up high and looked up. Sure enough, about 1 zhang above Xiaohua's head, at the top of the space, there was actually a blood-red pattern. Ah! Xiaohua was shocked. His hair stood on end again. Without hesitation, he urged his magic power and flew out of the space. In a few breaths' time, he had crossed the distance of several zhang. When Xiaohua's heartbeat gradually stabilized, he fell from the sky. The blood-red pattern still remained in his mind. That pattern was very strange. It could be said to be a human shape, but the whole body of the pattern was like a blood-red cloud. It couldn't be said to be a human shape, but the four corners and the head of the cloud were like hands, feet, and a head. What was special was that the two eyes on the head were exactly the same as a human's. How could there be such a strange thing in the 100 zhang elder's 100 zhang peak? Xiaohua walked back while frowning. What Xiaohua didn't know was that as soon as he flew out of the space, the blood-red cloud wriggled. Its two eyes faintly lit up. It even rotated for a moment. When it saw that there was no one in the space, it stopped. At the same time, Shanghua sect's Jiang Huanqi also stepped into the space with a sword talisman in his hand. Unlike Xiaohua, as soon as Jiang Huanqi entered the space, the jade beast he had been holding tightly in his hand immediately broke free from his hand. It turned into a pale green light and flew up. On top of Jiang Huanqi's head, there was also a blood-red pattern. The light that the jade beast turned into rushed into the blood-red pattern and immediately disappeared. When Jiang Huanqi woke up, he raised the moonstone and saw that the blood-red pattern had already wriggled. Seeing the blood-red color, Jiang Huanqi was as shocked as Xiaohua. He swung his hand and the sword talisman in his hand immediately pierced out. At the same time, Jiang Huanqi urged his spiritual power and prepared to fly away. However, he was already too late. The sword talisman pierced into the blood-red mist without any reaction. The blood-red mist covered the entire space with a bang. Jiang Huanqi's body, which had just flown into the air, was also covered by the blood-red mist. Ah! A scream was heard. It seemed that there was an irresistible pain. Jiang Huanqi's body quickly shrank and slowly disappeared. The same situation happened frequently in the different caves of the 1,000 Feet Mountain. Every time a cloud of blood mist appeared, there would be a miserable scream. This scream was so heart-wrenching that it was as if a person's soul was being violently attacked. However, each space was very far away, so the screams only traveled a short distance before disappearing. Did you hear that? It seems like someone is screaming. Li Zongbao suddenly stopped and said to Kai Zhuxia beside him. Oh. Is that so? Kai Zhuxia, who was mostly focused on Li Zongbao, was stunned. She pricked up her ears, but the surroundings were still dead silent. There was no sound. Fellow Taoist Zongbao. I didn't hear anything. Kai Zhuxia said curiously after a while. Maybe I misheard. Li Zongbao frowned slightly. The two of them walked for a while. Li Zongbao smiled and said, Fellow Taoist Zhuxia, I'm afraid we've reached the place in front. Eh? Is that so? Kai Zhuxia's face was filled with joy. She said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Zongbao, what did you see? But immediately, Li Zongbao scanned the space in front of them with his spiritual sense. He said hesitantly, It's very strange. There's nothing in the space in front of us. Could it be that our jade beasts aren't real? As they spoke, the two of them entered the space. The space was extremely spacious, and the moonlight wasn't able to illuminate it completely. Before Kai Zhuxia could take a good look at her surroundings, the jade beast in her hands suddenly flew into the air. Ouch! Following Kai Zhuxia's exclamation, Li Zongbao hurriedly scanned the space with his spiritual sense. A strong smell of blood came from the blood-red pattern. Oh no! Li Zongbao exclaimed in his heart. He scanned the pattern with his spiritual sense and sensed that something was very wrong. Before he could call Kai Zhuxia, Li Zongbao slapped his hand and took out a small jade bottle from his storage bag. His right hand made a series of gestures to activate his spiritual power. Seeing the thick blood fog above them, Li Zongbao shouted, Quick! His right hand made a gesture and hit the jade bottle. With the help of his spiritual power, the jade bottle suddenly emitted a pure blue light. After a few flashes, a round blue light spurted out from the mouth of the jade bottle. It was just enough to hold the blood fog and protect Kai Zhuxia and Li Zongbao. Fellow Taoist Zongbao. Kai Zhuxia exclaimed and leaned towards Li Zongbao involuntarily, Don't panic. I'm afraid we've fallen into a trap. Li Zongbao said calmly. He pulled on Kai Zhuxia's sleeve, and the two of them began to walk out of the space. But at this moment, the two eyes in the blood-red pattern flashed with a bloody light. Chapter 1389. Li Zongbao pulled Kai Zhuxia's sleeves. Under the protection of the jade bottle's deep blue brilliance, the two of them were about to safely withdraw from the space. Dozens of feet above them, on the head of the blood mist figure in the blood-colored pattern, a blood-red light flashed. The whole pattern suddenly lit up. With a swoosh sound, the whole space was filled with blood-red brilliance. Then, a blood-red light flashed under Li Zongbao and Kai Zhuoxia's feet. Before Li Zongbao and Kai Zhuoxia could react, their figures suddenly disappeared. They were actually teleported away. Compared to Li Zongbao, Xiaohua, and the others, Qing Fengmin and the rest of the loose cultivators were much more relaxed. These loose cultivators formed teams of dozens and cooperated with each other. Although the cave was quiet, everyone's hurried footsteps and the occasional sound filled their hearts with a sense of security. Therefore, everyone was grateful to Tian Qi and Qing Fengmin from the bottom of their hearts. Moreover, Qing Fengmin's jade beasts were obviously better than Kai Zhuoxia's. Kai Zhuoxia's group walked for a long time before they reached the end of the mountain path and entered the space. Qing Fengmin's group, on the other hand, used less than the time it took to eat a meal to reach the space directly. The space led by Tian Qi's jade beasts was quite large. Dozens or even hundreds of cultivators didn't seem to feel crowded when they entered. Fellow Taoist Qing. Is this the 1,000-feet-old man's cave? Ma Qingqing followed Qing Fengmin into the space and looked at the empty space with some doubts. Qing Fengmin smiled and shook his head slightly. According to Ai's observation, this place. I'm afraid it's not the 1,000-feet-old man's cave. If it's so easy to enter, then wouldn't the 1,000-feet-old man's mantle have been taken away 1,000 years ago? Oh, so it's like that. Ma Qingqing frowned. But I feel a little uneasy after entering this place. Well, fellow Taoist Ma, please wait a moment. I will place the moonstone on the stone wall. Qing Fengmin said calmly. Just as Qing Fengmin placed the moonstone on the stone wall, the entire space was illuminated. Dozens of rogue cultivators also entered this space. Fellow Taoist Qing, look up. Soon, someone noticed the blood-red pattern on top of the space. This pattern was extremely large, several times larger than the one Xiaohua had seen. Seeing this, Qing Fengmin's face was full of shock. He hurriedly shouted, "What is this? Has any fellow Taoist seen him before?" Just as everyone was about to discuss, the jade beast in Qing Fengmin's hand also turned into a light green brilliance and flew into the eyes of the blood-red pattern. It was different from what Jiang Huanqi and the others had encountered. When the blood-red mist surged, the blood-red light in the two eyes flashed, and the entire space flashed. The dozens of people in the cave were all teleported away. Once the dozens of people were sent away, the cave quickly returned to normal. The blood mist gradually solidified, and the jade beast in the eye suddenly disappeared as the blood mist solidified. Everyone who entered the 1,000-feet peak was either sent away or swallowed by the blood mist, disappearing without a trace. In the entire rugged and crisscrossed cave, only Xiaohua was left. Xiaohua walked on the mountain path and became more and more anxious. He followed the path he came from and kept walking back, but, after walking for a while, he discovered that this mountain path seemed to be different from the one he had just walked on. But he clearly walked directly back and there were no forks in the road. How could it be that it was blocked? At this time, he no longer hoped to find the 1,000-feet-old man's legacy, medicinal pills, or cultivation techniques. He only hoped to find a way out as soon as possible and quickly get out of this strange 1,000-feet peak. At this time, he gradually understood why the 1,000-feet-old man's legacy had not been inherited by anyone in the past 1,000 years. Hiss! A sound came from not far behind Xiaohua. Who is it? Xiaohua shouted as he turned his head. Unfortunately, when he turned his head back, the sound had already disappeared. Whoosh! A gust of wind sounded, as if something had flown over Xiaohua's head. Xiaohua did not hesitate, and threw the fireball talisman in his hand upwards. Rumble! A loud sound rang out, and the entire cave shook. But even though it shook, not a single piece of soil was shaken off. At this time, like a gust of wind, a blood mist as tall as a person gushed out from who knows where. It gradually gathered and took shape in the air before Xiaohua's eyes. Looking at its shape, it looked exactly like the blood-colored pattern. This is bad. Xiaohua was greatly alarmed. Without thinking, he threw out all the fireball talismans in his hand. They hit the surging blood mist and he flew away without looking back. Rumble. A burst of sound and light. The blood mist seemed to be unaffected by the exploding fireballs and gradually took the shape of a blood-colored human. GGA. The blood shadow actually made a sound, as if it was laughing nastily. Immediately, it chased after Xiaohua with extreme speed. The blood shadow's speed was extremely fast. Even though Xiaohua's flying speed was comparable to the 12th layer of the Qi refining realm, it was still inferior to the blood shadow by a lot. However, in the blink of an eye, the blood shadow was already behind Xiaohua. Xiaohua became vigilant and used his hand to brush the air. Immediately, a dozen different yellow talismans appeared in his hand. He urged his transcendence energy and shot them out. Fireball talismans, icicle talismans, weak water talismans, confinement talismans, and so on. All the yellow talismans were like clay oxen entering the sea. They simply could not raise the slightest wave and were unable to cause any damage to the blood shadow. Seeing that the blood shadow was about to pounce on him, a fork in the road appeared in front of Xiaohua. Without thinking, he turned his body and flew in another direction. The blood shadow was caught off guard and actually rushed far away. Immediately, it made a loud "ga-ga" sound, as if it was angry. When the blood shadow turned around the fork, Xiaohua had already flown far away. In this way, Xiaohua flew in front and the blood shadow chased from behind. In the time it took to brew a cup of tea, Xiaohua's vision suddenly turned black. He actually flew into a huge space. This space was about the same size as the space that Qing Fengmin and the others entered. Xiaohua saw that there was no way out and his face unconsciously became filled with shock. He stopped in horror. The blood shadow behind him also followed, making a "ga-ga" sound and pouncing on him. Xiaohua clenched his teeth and his figure suddenly jumped up, wanting to fly over the blood shadow. Who would have thought that just as Xiaohua surpassed the blood shadow and was secretly delighted, from the blood-colored pattern above his head, a cloud of blood mist also gushed out. It was even faster than the blood shadow before and covered Xiaohua's body. The blood mist stuck to Xiaohua's body. Weak water talismans, iron cloak talismans, they were all useless. The blood mist quickly seeped into Xiaohua's body and the transcendence energy in Xiaohua's meridians leaked out. Xiaohua's figure suddenly fell from the sky. The blood shadow that Xiaohua dodged also turned around at this time. It made a "ga-ga" sound and waved its hand. The blood mist flew out from Xiaohua's body and condensed into a blood-colored bead that flew into the blood shadow's hand. When the blood shadow swallowed the blood bead, Xiaohua struggled to stand up from the ground. His eyes were filled with horror as he looked at the blood shadow not far away in the moonlight. "Ga-ga," the blood shadow didn't seem to give Xiaohua any time. It flew up and pounced on Xiaohua in the blink of an eye, as if it wanted to penetrate his body. And just as the blood shadow pounced on him, Xiaohua's mind turned black and he lost consciousness. However, at this moment, a shocking scene appeared. The blood shadow pounced on Xiaohua's body and seemed to be trying its best to penetrate his body, but the blood shadow was unable to penetrate his body. In fact, the head of the blood shadow only spun around outside Xiaohua's Naiwen palace before it broke free again. After a long time, the blood shadow saw that there was no result. It could only fly up from Xiaohua's body and condense above the unconscious Xiaohua. A jerky and hoarse voice came from the blood shadow, "Demon, race, technique? No wonder you can't swallow blood essence. But, just now. Qi. Refining. Level 3. Naiwen Palace was, actually, sealed. This person. What's going on? The blood shadow's voice was indeed obscure, but, if the unconscious Xiao Hua could hear it, he would definitely be able to distinguish that this voice was somewhat similar to the voice of a person he was extremely familiar with. But Xiao Hua was already unconscious and couldn't hear it. Similarly, he couldn't answer the blood shadow's question. Soon after, the blood shadow jumped up and rushed into the blood-red pattern above the space. A burst of blood-red light flashed and Xiao Hua was also transported away. Speaking of which, under the protection of the jade bottle's dark blue light, Li Zongbao and Kai Zhuxia thought that they were safe from the blood mist. But unexpectedly, the eyes in the blood-red pattern flashed and the two of them were transported away from the space. Along with the dazzling light of the teleportation, a burst of pressure pressed down on Li Zongbao and Kai Zhuxia. Teleportation formation. Li Zongbao was shocked. He knew that if it was a long-distance teleportation formation, without the protection of a teleportation talisman, he and Kai Zhuxia would definitely be subjected to the pressure of unknown teleportation and would be crushed into meat paste very quickly. Fortunately, the pressure of the teleportation formation increased and immediately disappeared. Li Zongbao felt that he was standing on solid ground. Without waiting for him to open his eyes, a burst of dizziness came from his mind. He clenched his teeth and activated the magic power in his hand. Ignoring the uncomfortable feeling on his body, he sent his magic power to the magic tool in his hand. He was afraid that someone would sneak attack him at this time. Fortunately, after the time it took to drink half a cup of tea, the dizziness disappeared, and he didn't see anyone attacking him. When he stabilized his mind and wanted to call Kai Zhuxia, who was also dizzy, Li Zongbao was shocked by what he saw in front of him. It was a huge space, surrounded by blood-red light. It was impossible to tell whether this space was within the 1,000-feet mountain or somewhere else. In the center of this blood-red space was a huge stone statue. It looked like a cow, but it was not a cow, and it looked like a horse, but it was not a horse. However, in the place where the head of the beast should have been, there was a head that looked like a human head. On the back of the beast stood a tall, blood-red, and extremely ugly person. This person's forehead was extremely high, his nose was facing the sky, and two extremely long fangs were exposed at the corners of his mouth. What surprised Li Zongbao the most was that between the person's two arms, there was a thin membrane connected to his back. Who is this? Kai Zhuxia, who was next to him, also recovered. Looking at the unusually tall stone statue, she almost moaned. No, this is not a person, this is a demon. Li Zongbao narrowed his eyes and said coldly. Chapter 1390. Devil Dweller. Kai Zhuxia was shocked. Her beautiful face turned pale, and she couldn't close her mouth for a long time. It seemed, this devil dweller was extremely far away from her. She never thought that she would see it here. That's right, this is a person from the devil world. Li Zongbao released his divine sense and carefully observed. He saw that the devil beasts and devil dwellers in the stone statue were all made of strange materials. His divine sense could only get close, but couldn't penetrate in the slightest. Using his divine sense to sweep the blood-red edges of the space again, Li Zongbao's face was no longer as calm as before. This was actually a complete space. Even divine sense couldn't penetrate this blood-red brilliance, let alone find any way out. Fellow Taoist Zongbao, isn't this the 1,000-feet-old man's abode? Even if we found the wrong place, it's impossible to meet a devil dweller. Have we arrived at the devil world? Kai Zhuxia said while trembling with fear. Fellow Taoist Zhuxia, don't be afraid. The teleportation time just now was extremely short. It's impossible to teleport us to the devil world. Li Zongbao said firmly. Moreover, according to what I know in the sect, our Dawn Rain continent doesn't have any teleportation array that can directly connect to the devil world. Afterwards, Li Zongbao withdrew his divine sense and used his naked eyes to look at this space in the blood-red brilliance. He said in a low voice, "If I's guess is correct, this place is probably under the 1,000-feet peak, or the underground near the 1,000-feet peak." Then, the 1,000-feet old man's mantle. Kai Zhuoxia bit her lips and said hatefully. The 1,000-feet old man's mantle. I'm afraid, it's a beautiful legend. Li Zongbao sneered and said, "No wonder in 1,000 years, I haven't heard of anyone obtaining the 1,000-feet old man's mantle. Everyone who came in has already, heaven forsaken." Kai Zhuoxia exclaimed, "According to Xiao Hua, isn't there still a lot of loose cultivators coming? If we work together, we might have a chance of winning." Heaven forsaken? Li Zongbao smiled bitterly. He had heard from Xiao Hua that before them, Jiang Huanqi and dozens of others had already entered the 1,000 Zhang Peaks cave. Now that they had appeared here, those people were no longer here, so they must have already died. Even if they were all loose cultivators who had been forsaken by the heavens, what use would it be? Just as Li Zongbao was about to speak, some of the strange runes beneath their feet suddenly began to flicker, emitting a dazzling blood-red brilliance. "Quick, dodge!" Li Zongbao shouted. He grabbed Kai Zhuoxia's hand and flashed into the air. Shua! 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 Nearly 10 light sounds were heard. Within the huge space, 10 different runes flashed with a blood-red brilliance in 10 different places. Then, 10 groups of people abruptly appeared within the brilliance. Each group had dozens or even hundreds of people. They were the rogue cultivators who had been abandoned by the heavens. These loose cultivators had clearly fainted from the pressure of the teleportation. Most of them were lying on the ground, their eyes glazed over. Only 2 of them remained standing, looking at Li Zongbao and Kai Zhuoxia in the air with interest. These 2 people were none other than Qing Fengmin and Luo Jiesin. In just a moment, Qing Fengmin laughed wildly. "Ha ha ha, this is really wonderful. I never dreamed that a 12th layer qi refining cultivator would come to the 1,000 Zhang Peak. It seems like this time's plan is really too successful. Congratulations, fellow Taoist Qing." Luo Jiesin next to him cupped his hands and smiled. "Ha ha ha, congratulations to you too," Qing Fengmin said with a smile. "Fellow Taoist Qing, where is this place?" Ma Qingsheng had already woken up. Just like Li Zongbao, he looked around in astonishment. When he heard Qing Fengmin's words, he became even more afraid and asked while trembling with fear. "Where is this place? Fellow Taoist Ma, isn't this the Immortal's Cave of the 1,000 Zhang old man that you've been yearning for day and night?" Qing Fengmin sneered. "But, the Immortal's Cave of the 1,000 Zhang old man, how could there be these? This stone statue, is the 1,000 Zhang old man?" Ma Qingsheng asked bravely. "Demonic beast. Demon general." There was no lack of experienced and knowledgeable disbanded cultivators who had already seen the stone statue and shouted out loud. Then, everyone's eyes were fixed on Li Zongbao and Kai Zhuoxia in midair. Someone even asked tentatively, "Senior, are you a disciple of the Utopia faction? Why are you with the demon dwellers? Why did you trick us to come here?" Li Zongbao looked at them coldly and ignored them. He still held the jade bottle in his hand. The dark blue brilliance formed a round ball to cover himself and Kai Zhuoxia. "Fellow Taoist Qing, what the hell is going on? Please explain." Ma Qingsheng ignored the chaos around him and shouted loudly. "Ha ha ha, do you still need I to explain?" Qing Fengmin laughed and flew up. He landed directly in front of the stone statue and pointed at a stone niche in the corner of the stone statue. He said with a smile, "This is the 1,000 Zhang old man's legacy that you've been looking for. But, this 1,000 Zhang old man, actually didn't leave any skills or anything like that. He just died because I sucked out all his essence and blood. You, who the hell are you?" Before Ma Qingqing could speak, a tall cultivator beside him hurriedly asked. Who I am? Don't you know? Qing Fengmin laughed loudly. Just as he laughed, he stretched out his hand and hit Luo Jiesen's forehead. Luo Jiesen didn't resist at all. His whole body went soft and collapsed on the ground. Then, a blood-red shadow came out of Luo Jiesen's body and floated in midair with its fangs and claws bared. Ah! The surrounding cultivators were shocked and stepped back a few steps. At this moment, in front of the stone statue, another blood-red brilliance flashed. An even dimmer blood-red shadow flew out. Then, a thin and tall cultivator appeared. That cultivator was lying on the ground with his eyes closed. It was Xiaohua. Xiaohua. Not only did Li Zongbao and Kai Zhuxia exclaim, even Qing Fengmin was surprised. He didn't expect that this cultivator, who was only at the second level of qi refining at that time, could pass the test and come to the 1000 zhang peak. The blood-red shadow that had just appeared circled and flew straight to Qing Fengmin. It pounced forward and drilled into Qing Fengmin's body. Qing Fengmin's eyes slightly closed and then opened again. His eyes were filled with blood red. At the same time, he curiously stared at Xiaohua. Quick! Fellow Taoists, quickly attack this guy. Some rogue cultivator saw this strange scene and cried out in alarm. Hua. There was a burst of chaotic sounds. All kinds of yellow talismans were taken out from the storage bags of the rogue cultivators. They quickly flew towards Qing Fengmin. Some of the yellow talismans even hit Li Zongbao's magic weapon. Ha ha ha! How can this kind of magic power touch me? Qing Fengmin sneered and pounced forward. Similarly, a blood-red shadow flew out from Qing Fengmin's body. This blood-red shadow looked much more solid than the previous one. The blood-red shadow's facial features and limbs could all be seen clearly. Go, the blood-red shadow shouted. The blood-red shadow that escaped from Luo Jiesen's body also flew up. The two blood-red shadows rushed towards the rogue cultivators with Qing Fengmin. The whistling yellow talismans simply came from the blood-red shadows. They simply couldn't cause any damage to them. The one Qing Fengmin rushed towards was Ma Qingqing. Seeing the ferocious blood-red shadow pouncing on him, Ma Qingqing was horrified. He hurriedly threw out all kinds of yellow talismans. However, in the blink of an eye, the blood-red shadow rushed into Ma Qingqing's body. It didn't stop at all and immediately came out of Ma Qingqing's body. At the same time, the blood-red shadow came out of Ma Qingqing's back. Ma Qingqing's flesh rapidly shriveled and withered. All his blood essence and magic power were sucked dry by Qing Fengmin. That wasn't all. When Qing Fengmin's blood-red shadow left Ma Qingqing and pounced on another rogue cultivator on the left, Ma Qingqing's body gradually shriveled. Then, with a flash of red light, it actually emitted a blood-red flame. His entire body burned. Even his Taoist robe, storage bag, and so on were ignited little by little. The burning flame connected with the blood-red space again. Just before Ma Qingqing's remains burned, Qing Fengmin's blood-red shadow pounced on several rogue cultivators in a row. Every time he pounced on a rogue cultivator, that rogue cultivator would shrivel and burn just like Ma Qingqing, and Qing Fengmin's blood-red shadow would condense a little bit more. Similarly, on the other side, Luo Jiesen's blood-red shadow was just as swift. It also pounced on several rogue cultivators very quickly. Ah! The rogue cultivators woke up from their daze. They activated their flying talismans and fled in all directions like headless flies, hoping to find a chance to escape in this space. Fellow cultivator Zongbao. At this time, Kai Zhuxia was completely panicked. She hugged Li Zongbao's arm with her hands. Her body trembled non-stop and her teeth chattered in fear. Li Zongbao took a breath and pulled his arm out of her embrace. He patted her shoulder and landed on the ground. He whispered, "You protect yourself." wait for me to kill that devil. You. Kai Zhuxia stretched out her hand and grabbed Li Zongbao's sleeve extremely quickly. But then, she flung it away. She bit her lips and said in a trembling voice, You be careful. Li Zongbao nodded slightly. He patted his storage bag and took out a sword talisman. He activated his magic power and a crimson flying sword appeared in the air. Li Zongbao flew up and made a sword sign in his hand. The flying sword formed by the spiritual qi of heaven and earth quickly pierced towards Qing Fengmin's blood-red shadow. Ga, Qing Fengmin's tone had changed. He sneered and said, Little thing, let's see who's faster. After that, the blood-red shadow's flying speed increased a little. Li Zongbao's flying sword could only catch up with it. It was really difficult to pierce it. In the blink of an eye, the blood essence of several rogue cultivators was sucked away by the blood-red shadow, igniting several flames. This. Li Zongbao's flying sword talisman did not work and immediately threw it away. In the air, he patted his hand and took out a walnut-sized bell. Li Zongbao activated his magic power and shook his wrist slightly. A crisp sound of the bell rang. Following the sound of the bell, Qing Fengmin's blood-red shadow shook slightly. Its speed was obviously slower. Seeing this, Li Zongbao was overjoyed. He shook the bell in his hand one after another, although Qing Fengmin's blood-red shadow slowed down a lot because of the sound of the bell. At the same time, another person woke up from his coma because of the sound of the bell. Chapter 1391. This person was none other than Xiaohua. The ringing of bells entered Xiaohua's ears, awakening him from his stupor. At this time, he was lying in front of the stone statue, which was precisely the stone niche that Qing Fengmin had pointed out a moment ago. Xiaohua opened his eyes, and the first thing he saw was a huge pill furnace. The pill furnace was right in front of Xiaohua. Xiaohua only needed to stretch out his hand and touch one of the pill furnace's legs. Xiaohua didn't even need to think about it. His hand naturally exerted force and the pill furnace disappeared from the stone niche. When it reappeared, it was inside Xiaohua's space. Xiaohua instinctively put the pill furnace into his space. He suddenly realized, where is this? At the same time, the cries and howls from the blood-red space reached his ears. He stood up in horror. When he looked back, he was shocked by the tragic scene in front of him. The entire space was blood-red. Although there was no blood splattering everywhere, nor were there any broken limbs flying in the air, wherever the bloody shadow passed, a rogue cultivator's blood essence would be sucked away, a rogue cultivator's life would be reaped, and a ball of fire would burn. This silent tragedy pierced straight into Xiaohua's head. In an instant, Xiaohua recalled the scene of the blood shadow pouncing on him. Then, he looked at himself up and down in horror. Following that, he used his hands to feel all over his body. Only when he confirmed that he was still Xiaohua, did he relax slightly. Xiaohua, is that you? Kai Zhuxia's timid voice sounded not far from him. Xiaohua turned around and saw Kai Zhuxia under the blue light. When he was about to speak, his face suddenly changed and he shouted, Be careful. Kai Zhuxia heard and was shocked. She thought it was the blood shadow pouncing on her. But when she looked back, she saw several vicious rogue cultivators at level 5 of the Qi refining stage. They rushed into the blue light that was protecting Kai Zhuxia. The jade bottle belonged to the Utopia faction, so Kai Zhuxia couldn't control it. She could only hold it in her hand. When she saw several disbanded cultivators chasing after her, she could only prepare to fly away. However, when she was about to fly away, several more disbanded cultivators rushed into the blue light. These people were even more ferocious. They threw fireball spells and icicle spells at Kai Zhuxia, leaving her no time to fight back. Kai Zhuxia understood the meaning of these loose practitioners, but the blue light of this jade bottle was her only reliance. If she lost it, she would definitely end up like the other loose practitioners, having her blood essence devoured by the blood shadow. Kaizhuxia flew up. She still wanted to protect the jade bottle. However, when she had just flown half a foot into the air, the fireball talisman had struck her back with a series of rumbling sounds. The iron cloak talisman and the other iron cloak talismans that she had used earlier had been destroyed in a flash. If she did not give up on the jade bottle now, then she would be killed by the rogue cultivators now. She would not be able to wait for Shui Ying's arrival at all. "Let go, fellow Kaizhuxia!" Xiaohua shouted loudly from afar. Kaizhuxia sighed in her heart. She threw the jade bottle far away and flew towards Xiaohua herself. The jade bottle was thrown far away, and the deep blue light screen also swayed as it flew away. Along with it, Kaizhuxia's heart felt a bit of pity. Immediately, the remaining sense of security in Kaizhuxia's heart also disappeared without a trace. She watched as one blood-colored flame after another rose and quietly extinguished. One by one, fresh lives, silently passed away like this. The shadow of death had already covered her cheeks. A kind of indescribable fear filled Kaizhuxia's heart. In an instant, Kaizhuxia's eyes fell on Li Zongbao, who was chasing after Qing Fengmin's blood shadow in vain. A kind of intense remorse appeared in her heart. And just now, that was in the cave of the Thousand Zhang Peak, those several hours of searching in the almost endless darkness, that inseparable walking, once again engraved a deep sweetness in her heart. Maybe I was wrong. What's the use of me coming to find this cultivation method? If I can follow him, even if it's a pitch-black night, there's no need to be afraid. Kaizhuxia muttered in her heart. Now, I've fallen into a desperate situation. What can I do? If it wasn't for me, how could he come to this kind of place? Remorse filled Kaizhuxia's heart, driving away that fear again. She wished she could substitute herself and let Li Zongbao safely leave this blood-colored space. Fellow Kaizhuxia. Seeing Kaizhuxia flying over somewhat stupefied and staring straight at Li Zongbao, Xiaohua frowned slightly and said in his heart, "Big sister, now is not the time for you and me to be lovey-dovey. Don't try to show your affection. Even if you stare at him for 10,000 years, it's useless." But it was not good for him to say it, so he could only remind her, what's going on? Where is this place? Sigh. Fellow Xiao, it's I who harmed you. Kaizhuxia came to her senses. With a dejected expression, she said in a low voice, "I originally wanted to repay your kindness. That's why I brought you here, but I didn't expect." As she spoke, Kaizhuxia used a few words to explain what happened just now. Ah! Xiaohua's eyes widened. He used his finger to point at Li Zongbao's closely chasing blood shadow and said, It's Senior Qing. Bah, what's Senior Qing, it's just a demon. Kaizhuxia scolded, listening to the demon's words, "This Thousand Zhang Peak is a trap. Who knows how many cultivators this guy has devoured in the past 1,000 years." Xiaohua was silent. Needless to say, this Heaven Forsaken was also an organization Qing Fengmin used to send him blood food. Sigh, this organization is really meticulous. As long as it's a low-level loose cultivator, these people are at the bottom of the cultivation world. Who knows how many people die every day, who cares? Even if the loose cultivators in Heaven Forsaken were devoured by this blood shadow, who would care? Besides, this Qing Fengmin probably still has some tricks up his sleeve. Just like Mo Zhao and Black Forest, in the end, he got a few loose cultivators and got some elixirs or cultivation methods. This can spread the name of Heaven Forsaken and attract more loose cultivators. It can also avoid some suspicion from others. It's really flawless. Xiaohua instantly understood. At the same time, all the previous suspicions also had an answer. For example, Jiang Huanqi and the others must have died in the hands of the blood shadow. What about Ma Qingcheng? Xiaohua looked around, but there was no trace of him. Sigh, it's either he had good intentions but did bad things. He introduced many loose cultivators to Heaven Forsaken to save himself, but some of them became blood food for the demon. Or he's also a blood shadow of the demon. Thinking of this, a chill suddenly rose from the bottom of Xiaohua's heart. Heaven Forsaken was started by 3 people. Just now, Luo Jiesin mentioned by Kai Zhuxia might be one of them, but what about the third one? The third one must also be a blood shadow like Qing Fengmin. Who is he? Fellow Taoist Zhuxia, be careful. A voice came from far away. It was Li Zongbao, who was chasing after the blood shadow. He's still paying attention to me. Kai Zhuxia's remorseful heart was immediately filled with sweetness. At the same time, she also saw the blood shadow flying over from the side. That was Luo Jiesin's blood shadow. However, Kai Zhuxia only glanced at the blood shadow, then immediately fixed her eyes on Li Zongbao. For a moment, she wasn't willing to look away. Stupid woman. Xiaohua at the side naturally also saw this. He suddenly understood Kai Zhuxia's intention. This blood shadow was incomparably powerful. No yellow talisman could hurt it in the slightest. The cultivators in Heaven Forsaken who were at the 5th level of Qi refining simply didn't have any power to resist. All magic power attacks were ineffective. Since this was the case, Kai Zhuxia naturally couldn't escape from that strange blood shadow. Since this was the case, she might as well take another look at Li Zongbao. Perhaps this one look could be engraved into her next life. Although Xiaohua cursed, a kind of feeling arose spontaneously. His heart was filled with indescribable sympathy, and indescribable shock. It seemed, this kind of feeling, in his heart, also existed, but at this time, he didn't have time to think about it. What should I do? Seeing that the blood shadow was only about 3 meters away from Kai Zhuxia, this distance was practically non-existent in the eyes of the blood shadow. Devil person. Xiaohua's eyes suddenly brightened. With a wave of his hand, the devil's spear in the air was taken out by him. Without hesitation, Xiaohua quickly rushed forward, directly thrusting the strange blood shadow. Ah, thrusting spear. Luo Jiesin's voice rang out from the blood shadow. He was very surprised, but its speed couldn't be reduced for a moment. In addition, Xiaohua quickly rushed forward to meet it. Just as Luo Jiesin was speaking, the spear tip still pierced the blood shadow. A strange thing happened. The blood shadow that couldn't be touched by yellow talismans and other things was actually pierced by the devil's spear. In Xiaohua's eyes, it was as if the spear had pierced the flesh of a cultivator. Ah! Luo Jiesin's blood shadow screamed, turned around, and fled. Xiaohua was overjoyed. Just as he was about to give chase, he stopped again. Nonsense, there was still an infatuated female cultivator beside him who needed his protection. If he flew away, what would Kai Zhuxia do? Admittedly, this devil's spear tip could be given to her, but she had to be able to carry it. Luo Jiesin's scream wasn't loud, but it was enough to attract Kai Zhuxia's attention. It was also in Li Zongbao's eyes. Although Li Zongbao didn't know what Xiaohua did, Xiaohua being able to protect Kai Zhuxia was enough to make Li Zongbao feel relieved. Kai Zhuxia looked at the spear tip in Xiaohua's hand in disbelief. Then, she looked at Xiaohua's young face with even more disbelief. It seemed that half a year's time didn't leave any traces on Xiaohua's face. That youthful face, it was unknown how many secrets were hidden. He is a 3rd-level Qi refining loose cultivator. Kai Zhuxia couldn't help but ask herself. Ever since she met Xiaohua, all kinds of miracles made her not dare to believe her eyes. Xiaohua landed beside Kai Zhuxia with a smile. He tossed the devil's spear tip in the air and caught it again. He said, "Fellow Taoist Kai, don't be afraid. With I by your side, you're much stronger than Senior Li." Kai Zhuxia's face suddenly flushed red, and she couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of saliva. But immediately, her gaze once again looked towards Li Zongbao with concern. Although Xiaohua repelled the blood shadow, only Kaizhuxia knew that the numerous loose cultivators forsaken by the heavens had either crowded towards Li Zongbao's jade bottle or flown far away early on. They only cared about their own lives, and no one gave Xiaohua a glance. Chapter 1392. Li Zongbao was extremely depressed. Yes, he was obviously at the peak of the aura refining stage, much higher than Qing Fengmin's 5th level aura refining blood shadow, but his flying speed just couldn't catch up with the blood shadow. The sword talisman in his hand was constantly hovering behind the blood shadow, but if he wanted to stab the blood shadow, it was extremely difficult. Moreover, what worried Li Zongbao the most was that Qing Fengmin's blood shadow seemed to be improving as it swallowed the blood essence of rogue cultivators. He couldn't tell the blood shadow's cultivation level, but he knew it when he saw the distance between them gradually increasing. After Qing Fengmin's blood shadow swallowed the blood essence of nearly 200 rogue cultivators, it easily left Li Zongbao behind. Li Zongbao's sword talisman was even less effective. Could it be that I really have to? Li Zongbao was somewhat hesitant. Just now, he was extremely worried about Kaizhuxia and wanted to use his last resort, but it was already too late. Later, Xiaohua unexpectedly attacked and repelled the blood shadow. While Li Zongbao was pleasantly surprised, he didn't think about it for the time being, but the current situation was somewhat bad. Unfortunately, this wasn't the worst situation. The thing that made Li Zongbao scratch his head the most was what happened after the cigarette. After Qing Fengmin's blood shadow devoured the blood essence of nearly 300 individual cultivators, it suddenly let out a shrill laugh. In a hurry, Qing Fengmin's blood shadow shook slightly and actually tore apart from the middle of the blood shadow. The two halves of the blood shadow squirmed for a while and became two complete blood shadows. However, the flying speed of these two blood shadows was obviously slower. Not only was Li Zongbao shocked, but also Xiaohua and Kaizhuxia who were watching from afar. Fellow Daoist Xiao, you, quickly go and help fellow Daoist Zongbao. If the blood shadow swallows all the rogue cultivators, you and I will have no chance of survival. Kaizhuxia bit her lip and said. Xiaohua smiled bitterly and shook his head slightly. Fellow Daoist Kai, it's not that I don't want to help. Senior Li's flying speed is so fast, but he can't catch up with the blood shadow. Do you think I can catch up? Instead of worrying about one thing and losing the other, I might as well protect you first and see if there's any chance in the end. Xiaohua hesitated and said in a low voice, moreover, from what I see, since Senior Li can take out a jade bottle magic tool, don't tell me he doesn't have other magic tools. He has divine sense, he should have no problem using magic tools, but he hasn't used them all this time, I'm afraid, waiting for an opportunity. So it's like this. Kaizhuxia's was confused. True's true essences, true's life, true life's true essence. A crisp sound, the small two, the sword's sword. It's, the sword s, the swords s, it s, s, it's. Li Zongbao took out the flying sword. Without the slightest hesitation, he urged the magic power in his body. His flying speed suddenly increased, and he quickly caught up with the blood shadow. The sword pierced into the blood shadow, that blood shadow was also alert. Seeing the flying sword about to pierce it, it hastily changed its direction. Qi La, the flying sword streaked across a corner of the blood shadow and flew to the side. The blood shadow also wriggled for a while. The place where the flying sword pierced was like boiling water. After it calmed down, the color of blood faded a little. Good. Seeing the flying sword's effect, Li Zongbao's heart couldn't help but tremble. The corners of his mouth revealed a smile. However, due to the urgency of the situation, Li Zongbao not only didn't increase his speed to chase after Xiaohua, he actually slowed down and only followed from a distance. But then, Li Zongbao's next move made Xiaohua feel like he was struck by lightning. Although Li Zongbao's figure fell behind, the flying sword had already left his hand. Under the control of his sword technique, the flying sword seemed to be pinched in his hand. It was extremely nimble as it pierced towards the blood shadow. Moreover, the flying sword's speed was much faster than his flying speed. It was able to catch up with the blood shadow. That blood shadow seemed to be extremely frightened. It tried its best to escape. It fluttered helplessly in the entire bloody space, only wanting to avoid the flying sword. On the other hand, Li Zongbao was in hot pursuit. Every time he activated the flying sword, he would stab the blood shadow from an unavoidable angle. Every time he stabbed, the blood shadow would boil for a moment, and the blood-colored brilliance would also weaken a little. Xiaohua held the devil spear's tip in his hand and stood in front of Kaizhuxia. His eyes were fixed on Li Zongbao like a wooden chicken. Looking at his infatuation, he was simply paying more attention than Kaizhuxia. However, what Xiaohua paid attention to was the sword technique in Li Zongbao's hand. Xiaohua himself had used the flying sword talisman before. However, the flying sword talisman was completely different from this flying sword technique. When Xiaohua controlled the flying sword talisman, he didn't feel anything. However, today, when he suddenly saw Li Zongbao use the flying sword technique and saw the sword technique in Li Zongbao's hand, he felt an extremely familiar feeling. The feeling Xiaohua had when he saw Xiao Yuehong's pill refining technique was exactly the same. So much so that the 5 fingers of Xiaohua's empty left hand had already begun to faintly move. The technique that didn't take shape was actually even more mysterious than Li Zongbao's sword technique, and even more agile. Fellow Taoist Xiao, fellow Taoist Xiao. Just as Xiaohua was immersed in the pleasure of using the technique, Kaizhuxia's anxious voice rang in his ears. Ah! Fellow Taoist Kai. Xiaohua woke up. At this time, Li Zongbao had already chased the blood shadow into an extremely sorry state. The blood shadow's bloody color had become extremely thin again. Quickly look over there. Kaizhuxia woke up Xiaohua, who had been standing blankly for a long time, and pointed behind him. Ah! Xiaohua turned his head, his face revealing a panicked expression. As it turned out, during the time Xiaohua was standing blankly, Li Zongbao admittedly defeated the blood shadow so badly that it almost didn't have any power to retaliate. However, the other 2 blood shadows had devoured all of the independent cultivators who had been forsaken by the heavens. Only within the deep blue brilliance of the utmost happiness faction's magic artifact Jade Bottle, there were still a dozen or so cultivators standing inside, trembling. They had very pitifully pinned their hopes on this magic artifact. And at their feet, there were also a dozen or so corpses of independent cultivators. These corpses weren't devoured by the blood shadows, but, because they were fighting over the space within the brilliance, they had been killed by the blood shadows. GGA. The 2 blood shadows let out arrogant sounds in midair. They swooped down on the ground and swept through all of the corpses. The blood and flesh of those independent cultivators who had just been killed were also devoured by them. Urgently, the 2 blood shadows surrounded the deep blue brilliance and rapidly circled around it a few times, as if they were very afraid of that brilliance. However, just as the independent cultivators within the brilliance revealed a trace of luck or rejoicing in their eyes, the 2 blood shadows let out an extremely ear-piercing shriek at the same time. That shriek almost pierced Xiaohua's ears. In the midst of this sharp shriek, the blue brilliance emitted by the jade bottle was shattered into pieces like colored glass. This is bad. Seeing this, Xiaohua suddenly felt like he had been teased in his heart. The brilliance of this jade bottle could clearly be easily broken by the blood shadows, but the blood shadows didn't break the brilliance first. Instead, they drove the independent cultivators who had been abandoned by the heavens to hide inside first, letting the independent cultivators kill each other, letting them feel lucky in their hearts. Once the blood shadows finished devouring the other independent cultivators, they would deal with the independent cultivators who were safely hiding inside the brilliance. Sure enough, the dozen or so cultivators were simply no match for the two blood shadows in a single round. No matter how they wailed, how they fled, and how they threw out all of their yellow talismans, they couldn't escape the fate of being pierced through. They couldn't escape the fate of being burned to ashes. This is bad. Xiaohua suddenly came to a realization and shouted, "It's a diversion." Of course, when Xiaohua turned his head to look at Li Zongbao again, sure enough, the blood shadow that was being chased by Li Zongbao's flying sword was no longer in a sorry state. It let out a shriek in midair, revealing a kind of complacency and arrogance. "Mr. Zongbao, be careful." Kai Zhuxia couldn't help but shout. The blood shadow that was being chased by the flying sword sat cross-legged in the air and flew toward the other two thick blood shadows. At the same time, the other two blood shadows also went to meet it. Li Zongbao's face seemed to be pale, and he drove the flying sword to chase behind the blood shadow. Immediately afterward, about 10 feet to the left of Xiaohua, the three blood shadows collided. Another shocking scene occurred. The three blood shadows didn't stop at all. With a bang sound, they collided with each other. The entire blood shadow merged into a thick mass of blood, rolling unceasingly in the air. Quick! Li Zongbao also flew to Kai Zhuxia's side at this time. He made a sword gesture in his hand, and the flying sword pierced into the blood ball with a poof. However, this time, it was far less effective than before. The flying sword was only able to penetrate half a centimeter before it could no longer move. Just as Li Zongbao was about to activate his spiritual power, a ferocious human head suddenly popped out from the blood ball. It opened its bloody mouth and bit the flying sword. With a crunching sound, the flying sword was chewed into pieces. "Ah!" Li Zongbao exclaimed, as if he was in great pain. A mouthful of blood spurted out from his mouth. Obviously, the destruction of the flying sword injured his mind to a certain extent. Fellow Taoist Zongbao. Kai Zhuxia was more nervous than anyone else. She hurried over, but before she could get close, the blood ball underwent an even more astonishing change. The hideous human head that swallowed the flying sword didn't disappear. The whole blood ball shook violently. Then, the human head gradually grew out of the blood ball, growing taller and taller. Behind the human head was a neck, shoulders. Finally, it turned into a complete blood-colored human figure. "Ha ha ha!" The blood man laughed. It was Qin Fengmin's voice. "Fellow Taoist Li. You've been busy for a long time, are you tired? If you are tired, then take a rest. Let this senior take over your cultivation, how about it? Take over." Xiaohua was shocked when he heard this. He seemed to have realized something. This senior's human figure can't be used for a long time. I just need to find a suitable one. You, a peak chi refining cultivator, actually came to join in the fun. This senior actually got a bargain. Ha ha ha, who knows, I might even be able to take a peek into the foundation establishment realm of cultivation. Chapter 1393. The bloody man's entire body floated in the air. It was as if countless black blood was rapidly flowing inside his body. It was incomparably strange. Kai Zhuxia and Xiaohua's faces were deathly pale. Because from the imposing manner of this bloody man, Xiaohua and the others faintly felt that this bloody man's strength should be close to that of a foundation establishment cultivator. However, Li Zongbao, who was still somewhat pale a moment ago, calmed down at this moment. His figure also floated into the air and stood straight in front of the bloody man. He coldly stared at him. After a moment, he also raised his head and laughed loudly. Demons are demons after all. They only know how to fight and fight. Even if they learned a little in the human world, they still dare to be arrogant. Let me tell you, when you are scheming against I is also scheming against you. As he spoke, Li Zongbao slapped his hand and took out a shiny object from his storage bag. With a wave of his hand, the shiny object rapidly flew into the air and immediately turned into a net that directly enveloped the blood figure. The blood figure was unable to react in time and was submerged in the net. What are you doing? The bloody figure was somewhat puzzled. However, Li Zongbao did not answer. He very strangely flipped his hand and hit the top of his head. An extremely bright brilliance soared into the sky and directly shot above the space where the bloody mist was condensed. The bloody mist was scattered in all directions, revealing a large area of mountain rocks. It turned out that this bloody space was still within the 1,000 peak. Xiaohua squinted his eyes and looked carefully. Right at the top of Li Zongbao's head, there was a sparkling and translucent talisman. That talisman was not made of talisman paper, so Xiaohua could not see what it was. He only knew that the bright brilliance was emitted from that talisman. Top-grade talisman. Kaizhuxia took a deep breath and exclaimed in a low voice. Talisman? Xiaohua woke up. Just now, Li Zongbao had definitely shot out a talisman. This was something that was not commonly seen in the cultivation world. However, this talisman is stuck on Li Zongbao's head. What does it have to do with scheming against that demon? The talisman that was inserted into the blood shadow didn't seem to have any effect. Xiaohua was very puzzled, but Li Zongbao immediately gave a very clear answer. Li Zongbao formed a hand seal and his right hand gently removed the jade talisman from his head. Once the jade talisman was removed from Li Zongbao's head, it immediately turned into a ball of light and flew into Li Zongbao's forehead. Enhance magic power. Xiaohua was even more puzzled. And the instant the ball of light entered Li Zongbao's forehead, an indescribable pressure came from Li Zongbao's body. That pressure couldn't be suppressed and filled the entire blood-colored space. Moreover, what Xiaohua didn't understand the most was that the pressure was actually rising all the way. Foundation establishment. Xiaohua moaned with great difficulty. It was a realm that he could only dream of. Kaizhuxia's face was even more splendid. First, she was concerned, then puzzled, then pleasantly surprised, and finally, her face turned ashen. As the pressure on Li Zongbao's body continued to increase, Li Zongbao's body emitted an extremely large suction force. The spiritual qi of heaven and earth in the blood-colored space couldn't be suppressed and poured into Li Zongbao's body. Not only that, a burst of muffled ka-cha-cha sounds rang out. A few thunderclaps resounded on the 1,000 peak. One after another, sparkling and translucent beads that could be seen with the naked eye suddenly appeared on the 1,000 peak. They were the condensed spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Whoosh, a gust of wind blew. These condensed spiritual qi of heaven and earth suddenly condensed into the blood-colored space where Li Zongbao was, completely ignoring the existence of any stone walls. Similarly, the blood-colored fog that originally enveloped the entire cave was blown away without a trace by the gust of spiritual qi of heaven and earth, revealing the original appearance of the cave. Heaven's Foundation Establishment Cultivator. Xiaohua suddenly understood. Li Zongbao could have set foot in the foundation establishment stage long ago. It was only because of some reason that he used the Utmost Happiness faction's secret talisman to suppress his own cultivation level. Only at this moment did he directly ascend to the foundation establishment stage. Originally, Xiaohua didn't know how powerful a foundation establishment stage cultivator was. But now that he saw the massive amount of spiritual qi of heaven and earth flocking over, he didn't know how many times more the amount of spiritual qi in Li Zongbao's body's meridians was compared to his qi refinement stage. He knew how big the difference between Li Zongbao's magic power at the peak of qi refinement stage level 12 and the initial stage of foundation establishment was. This difference absolutely couldn't be measured by quantity. Sure enough, seeing that Li Zongbao had actually advanced to the foundation establishment stage, Qing Fengmin's blood figure also revealed an expression of astonishment. Just as Li Zongbao was absorbing the surrounding spiritual qi of heaven and earth to complete the accumulation of foundation establishment magic power, the blood figure hurriedly moved, preparing to split into several different blood shadows. However, that blood shadow churned several times and couldn't split up. It could only become a single blood shadow and flee towards the outside of the stone walls. Unfortunately, at this moment, Li Zongbao was advancing to the foundation establishment stage. The surrounding space was restricted. Li Zongbao simply ignored it and closed his eyes to savor the new realm he had just attained. Waiting for the surrounding spiritual qi to disappear, Li Zongbao withdrew the magic power within his body. The pressure he released also abruptly disappeared. Only then did he coldly say, "Don't even think about escaping for now. The surrounding space won't be released for the next hour." "Huh, is that so?" That blood figure suddenly transformed into a blood shadow again and laughed loudly. "Want to split up?" Li Zongbao sneered. "I was waiting for you to condense into a human form. How could I give you the chance? Stop dreaming, prepare to die." As he spoke, Li Zongbao slapped his storage bag. A ring emitting crimson flames appeared in the air. Once the ring flew into the air, it immediately began to spin. As it spun, it gradually increased in speed. Li Zongbao stood steadily in midair. His divine sense drove the ring, and with a hand seal, the ring flew toward the blood shadow. In the blink of an eye, the ring flew above the blood shadow. A huge suction force was emitted from the spinning ring. The blood shadow seemed to know the power of the ring. The entire blood shadow flew out from the stone wall and rapidly flew to other places in the cave. The blood shadow's speed was undeniably fast. If it was the Li Zongbao before the foundation establishment stage, he definitely wouldn't be able to catch up. However, Li Zongbao didn't chase after it. His divine sense had already enveloped the entire cave. Wherever the blood shadow flew, the ring would immediately fly there under the control of his divine sense. And every time it flew above the blood shadow, a large piece of the blood shadow would be pulled down and thrown into the whirlpool of the ring. In the time it took to eat a meal, half of the blood shadow had been sucked in by the ring. Seeing that the situation wasn't good, the blood shadow turned sharply in the air and swooped down, rushing towards Kaizhuxia. How could Xiaohua let him succeed? He couldn't catch up to the blood shadow. Wasn't he waiting for the moment when the blood shadow would chase after him? Therefore, Xiaohua rushed in front of Kaizhuxia without hesitation. The tip of the demonic spear thrust forward and stabbed the blood shadow. Ah! With a blood-curdling scream, the blood shadow flew backwards. At this moment, Li Zongbao's ring also arrived. Li Zongbao's face was slightly angry. He opened his mouth and spat out a stream of life essence onto the ring. The ring suddenly enlarged several times and the suction force also increased sharply. Ah! Just as the blood shadow screamed, it was firmly sucked in by the ring. Li Zongbao's face was pale. Spitting out 2 mouthfuls of life essence in a row just now was still too much for him. With a point of his finger, the ring gradually shrank and flew in front of Li Zongbao. However, the ring only shrank a little and couldn't shrink anymore. It seemed that it couldn't return to its previous state. As for the blood shadow in the ring, it turned into a blood ball and faintly rotated in the ring. Moreover, it was still expanding from time to time. Ga, Qing Fengmin's voice sounded again, Foundation Establishment Cultivator, is nothing more than this. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Looking at the blood ball in the air, Li Zongbao bit his lips and opened his storage pouch. After looking at it for a while, Li Zongbao raised his head and said, I will only ask you one question. Are you willing to answer? Answer? Why should I answer you? If you answer, I promise not to take your life. Senior Li. Kai Zhuoxia's face was deathly pale. She cried out in alarm, somewhat unaccustomed, "This devil has harmed countless of my cultivators. How can I spare its life? Ga, what does little girl know? You, Senior Li, can't take my life, so you had no choice but to use this method." Presumably, his question is also the reason why he appeared on Thousand Zhang Peak. Ah. Hearing this, Kai Zhuoxia's expression became even more miserable. She immediately lowered her head and said no more. Li Zongbao glanced at Kai Zhuoxia and turned to the blood shadow. 2 years ago, at Thousand Zhang Peak, did you, Tianqi, meet a disciple of the Utopia faction called Li Mingyang? Li Mingyang of the Utopia faction. 2 years ago, I did something at Thousand Zhang Peak. However, there were many cultivators at that time. How can I remember? If you don't remember, then I can't promise you. Li Zongbao said coldly. Li Mingyang was about 13 years old, level 5 of the qi refining stage. He had a small red mole on his forehead and spoke very childishly. Ha ha ha, I remember now. So he was from the Utopia faction. A little cultivator at level 5 of the qi refining stage actually dared to show off in front of me. I just swallowed his blood essence. That's it. As the blood shadow spoke, the head of a 13-year-old child appeared in the blood ball and asked, "Is this person?" "Ah, yes." Li Zongbao sighed and didn't speak again. "Okay, I already answered your question. You have to keep your promise and let me go." The blood shadow said angrily. "When did I promise you? I only said I wouldn't take your life. I didn't say I would let you go." Li Zongbao sneered. "Besides, even if I don't take your life, others can't take your life. You." The blood shadow was furious. The whole blood ball in the ring rapidly expanded. When Xiao Hua heard Li Zongbao's question earlier, he already understood in his heart. The devil spear in his hand was already ready. Hearing Li Zongbao's answer, how could he not know that he had to make a move? Xiao Hua circulated his magic power and flew into the air. The tip of the demonic spear gathered in front of him and pierced towards the ball of blood. "Xiao Hua, I took care of you in every possible way. I even gave you the method of making talismans." The blood ball said urgently in Qing Fengmin's voice. "Besides, I also know how to get rid of you." However, how could Xiao Hua dare to let it live for a moment longer? When Qing Fengmin finished speaking, Xiao Hua's devil spear immediately pierced into the blood ball. A black light circled around the blood ball and the blood ball immediately stopped surging. Soon after, it rapidly shrank. The huge blood ball actually disappeared in the blink of an eye. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.